Chapter 367. 3 days later, Rinpoche looked at the human-shaped bomb that was 1 foot taller than him and had a shell made entirely of special steel. He took out his phone and took a selfie of himself. Although it wasn't exactly the same, he could tell that it was him. However, the hairstyle he wanted was a bun. What was on this statue's head? A carrot? Also, this outfit was different from what he had imagined. This bomb weighs 312 kilograms and contains 142 kilograms of high explosives as well as more than 20,000 fragments. It has a killing radius of 120 meters. In fact, at a distance of 200 meters, the fragments can still cause considerable damage to unprotected people, the military personnel explained. Although he didn't ask what he shouldn't, he was still very curious about this extremely strange bomb. Rinpoche nodded his head as he listened. He was generally satisfied with this bomb. The most important thing was that there was a walkie-talkie, a miniature loudspeaker, and a listening device on its head, which completely met his requirements. He immediately asked someone to send the bomb to the garage of the villa and returned to Dayo with it by the waist. First, he went outside to understand the situation. Although Great Xia was still attacking the city today, the intensity was much lower than before. It seemed that Great Xia was also waiting for reinforcements. It was estimated that the reinforcements would arrive in the afternoon and could only enter the battle tomorrow at the earliest. Your Majesty, let's abandon the city, Licencio said with difficulty. If they wanted to abandon the city, this was the best time to do so. When Great Xia's reinforcements arrived, it would be really difficult to defend the city. With the addition of reinforcements, Great Xia's morale was even higher. There were only 3,000 defenders and nearly 1,000 winged cavalry warriors in the city. What do you think? The Empress turned to look at Rinpoche. Although she didn't say anything else, everyone knew that she was definitely unwilling. No monarch would choose to abandon a city when he was personally leading the army into battle, especially for an expert like her who was proud and arrogant. Furthermore, if the 100,000 soldiers here were to head south, there would be a total of 300,000 enemies. Dayo's north would be completely undefended, and it would be equivalent to surrendering the city to someone else. I think we can still give it a try, Rinpoche said. The frown on the Empress's face immediately disappeared. No matter what, Rinpoche always had a way. Does Sir Rin have any other way? Licencio asked hesitantly. The things that Rinpoche brought were indeed very useful. If he still had a large number of weapons that he had used before, he might be able to hold on for a period of time. However, how long could he hold on for? If possible, he didn't want to abandon the city either. If they abandoned the city, Chesua Pass and Shun City would be completely isolated. The entire northern region of Dayo would be completely at the mercy of the enemy. But if they couldn't defend it in the end, it would be better to retreat now and retreat to the mouth of the pot. That place was easy to defend and hard to attack. With the current army, they could still defend the mouth of the pot and then counterattack. There's a way, Rinpoche said. Your Majesty, Lord Li, please follow me. Rinpoche brought the two of them to his room, pointed at the statue and said, You can try using this. Licencio had a puzzled look on his face when he saw the metal statue inside. Using this statue to defend the city? The Empress looked at the statue, looked at Rinpoche, and then looked at the statue again. Soon after, she suddenly recalled something, pointed at the statue and said, Xia. What was summer again? I can't remember, I didn't remember at that time. However, the Empress still remembered that he was the 7th Prince of Great Xia. That's right, the statue of the 7th Prince of Great Xia. Rinpoche nodded. Licencio had a look of understanding and said, If it's the statue of the Great Xia Emperor, it might be of some use but only a little use. If the statue of the Great Xia Emperor was erected on top of the city wall, would the enemy still dare to attack? Wouldn't they be afraid of being put in a difficult position? They probably wouldn't dare to. But even if they didn't dare to, it was just a statue and couldn't encircle the city wall. Moreover, who would remember this matter when the war started? It's not what you think. Rinpoche waved his hand. What should we do then? Licencio asked curiously. Boom. Rinpoche made an explosion gesture with both hands. Explosion is art. Let them move the statue to the commander and destroy it in one fell swoop. How is that possible? You will know tomorrow morning. Rinpoche waved his hand. Sir Rin, are you really confident? You will know tomorrow morning. Rinpoche still said the same thing. He felt that the feasibility of this plan was quite high, but whether it would work or not would depend on luck. Nothing in the world was guaranteed. No matter how thorough the plan was, there could still be all kinds of problems. A day passed and it was late at night when the sky was at its darkest. The north gate of Liao City opened quietly. Ren Baqian and Li Qianqiu led the guards out of the city carrying the bomb and headed straight for the Great Xia barracks. Li Qianqiu was here to be Ren Baqian's bodyguard. With his strength as a protector general, even if he encountered the weakest of the top 10 experts, he would still be able to hold them off for a few moves. As for the other spirit wheel experts, he would be able to capture them whenever they came. "Alright, leave it here," Ren Baqian said as he looked at the torch in the distance. This place was less than 200 meters away from the main gate of the Great Xia barracks, and they would be able to see it as soon as the sky brightened up a little. "Go back." After the guards put the bomb down, Ren Baqian and the rest went back the way they came. Nothing happened along the way. Other than the two people carrying the statue, the rest were just out for a stroll. What next? "Wait for the patrol team," Ren Baqian said with his night vision goggles. Not long after everyone returned to the city wall, a Great Xia patrol team arrived near the bomb. With the help of the starlight, they saw a vague figure in front of them and got a shock. They pointed their spears at the bomb and shouted, "Who's there?" Following this shout, the guards in front of the barracks also sensed something. They immediately rang the big gong at the side and woke up everyone in the barracks. "What's the matter?" a patrolling captain asked loudly. "There's a statue here." The previous patrol team finally discovered that the motionless thing was actually a statue and not a real person. It was just a false alarm. But why would such a statue be here? It couldn't possibly grow its legs and run here, right? When the lieutenant arrived and saw the statue, he first asked when it had appeared here. He also wondered what the barbarians were up to. "You have been surrounded. Surrender immediately and you will be spared. You have been surrounded. Surrender immediately." A computer-synthesized voice suddenly came from the statue, startling the captain and the surrounding guards. The captain pulled out his saber, but the statue remained motionless. It said emotionlessly, "You've been surrounded? What the hell?" The captain was aghast. This thing could actually speak? Also, who was surrounded? Were we surrounded? What a joke. "Go and patrol the surroundings and see if there's anyone else. Go and report to the commander-in-chief." The captain ordered the nearby soldiers. "What's going on? Who's talking?" At this moment, a captain who was awakened came over and asked, "Captain, there's a statue here and it can speak." When the captain came over and saw the statue, he touched it and confirmed that it was indeed made of metal. He then lifted it up with his hand and found that it was quite heavy. However, this statue could actually speak, which made him click his tongue in wonder. It was really strange. Chapter 368. "Sir Ren, what should we do next?" Li Qianqiu asked after returning to the city. "Wait, let's see the fireworks," Ren Baqian said as he opened the other box that the guard was carrying. Inside was a full set of surveillance equipment and a walkie-talkie. TSK, this thing is really strange. It's obviously made of iron, but it can still make sounds," informed the general. As soon as Ren Baqian turned on the surveillance device, he heard these two sentences as well as the sentence, "You have been surrounded. Surrender immediately and hand over your guns." This is? Li Qianqiu immediately thought of the radio and walkie-talkies that they used. Could there be one in the statue? More or less. Ren Baqian nodded. Even though it wasn't that far off. That way we'll know if it's in the hands of the enemy commander. By the way, do you know who their commander is? It should be Jianghu, Li Qianqiu said. Very powerful. I'm not sure, but he has been fighting against the general-in-chief who supports the nation for decades, so he should have some skills. Looking at the current situation, it should be very powerful, right? Li Qianqiu smiled bitterly. If it was a one-on-one fight, he was confident that he could beat 10 of them. However, in terms of leading an army, the other party was indeed formidable. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that the Great Xia army had lost more than half of its members and that there hadn't been any large-scale desertions up until now showed that the other party had some means to manage the army. What about his personal strength? This was what Ren Baqian wanted to ask. No more than the pinnacle of the earth wheel level, Li Qianqiu replied. Even though he didn't understand the specifics, Great Xia was different from the aboriginals. Most of the aboriginal court officials were at least at the spirit wheel level, and there were many man-wheel experts in Great Xia. There were only a handful of famous spirit wheel experts. On the contrary, there were many spirit wheel experts outside of the imperial court. Great Xia placed more emphasis on the ability to handle political affairs and govern the region. As for the aboriginals, they were all the same from top to bottom. The one with the biggest fist was the boss. After hearing that the other party wasn't at the peak of the earth wheel level, Ren Baqian knew what was going on. Tomorrow you can write a petition to save your honor and send it to the Great Xia barracks. What's that? I mourn deeply for Wu Xingho. He lived a difficult life and died a wrong death. Cause of death: long hair, short knowledge. Li Qianqiu, the great general, has ordered us to check if there are any problems. If there are no problems, transport them into the camp. Ren Baqian's face lit up when he heard the words from the surveillance equipment. The first step was a success. If there was anything he was most afraid of, it would be the other party smashing this thing. Since the other party was interested, things would be easy. The great Xia soldiers examined it carefully for a long time. The entire body was made of metal, but they couldn't find any problems with it. Other than the fact that this statue could make a sound, there was nothing else strange about it. Finally, under the urging of others, the bomber was carried into the camp. You've been surrounded. A voice rang out. What is this? More than one person asked the same question along the way. Everyone could tell that it was a metal statue, but the fact that it could make a sound was enough to surprise them. There's a person inside? This sentence had also been repeated many times by others. However, everyone quickly discarded this thought. After all, no fool would keep repeating the same sentence. Sir, this is the statue that can make sounds. This thing is strange. How did it make that sound? It should be coming from here. Should we open it and take a look? Ren Baqian's heart tightened when he heard this. If they really found a way to open this thing, it would be really troublesome. Was the person who was addressed as Sir Wu Xingho? If it was, he could directly detonate it. If it wasn't, then it would be a failure this time. Fortunately, the other party's next sentence made him feel relieved. At the same time, he was ecstatic. Wait, I'll go and ask the general. Ren Baqian was ecstatic. This general refers to Wu Xingho, right? He didn't believe that Wu Xingho wasn't curious and wouldn't come to take a look if he knew there was such a thing. Li Qianqiu originally made this statue according to his appearance in the hope that someone could recognize the seventh prince and then deliver it to Wu Xingho. Although no one could recognize him now, his goal was likely to be achieved. Wu Xingho's position is the champion general, Li Qianqiu added. That's him. Ren Baqian slapped his thigh and sang softly, Little rabbit, be good. Open the door. Quickly open it. Come into the bowl. After about 10 minutes, Ren Baqian heard the voice of the person who was addressed as Sir. Carry it and follow me. Upon hearing this, Ren Baqian happily asked Li Qianqiu, Do you have wine? Bring a dish to go with it and watch the fireworks in a while. We have dishes, but only Her Majesty has wine. Li Qianqiu turned his head and glanced at him. After being besieged for a month, how could there be wine? Ren Baqian took out his walkie-talkie and called the Empress. After a while, he heard her slightly confused voice. What's the matter? Your Majesty, do you want to watch the fireworks? The fireworks are ready, so I'm asking Her Majesty. Fireworks? The Empress sobered up a little and was slightly puzzled. She immediately thought of the fireworks that she had seen with Ren Baqian in Prague. Where did the fireworks come from at this time? Not only are there fireworks, but there are also dishes. All that's left is Your Majesty and wine. Ren Baqian laughed. Li Qianqiu was shocked. All that's left is Your Majesty and wine? You're the first person who dares to say this. Impressive. Li Qianqiu immediately moved 2 meters to avoid being splashed with blood. Given Principal Ren's weak physique, would Her Majesty beat him to death? It shouldn't be. No matter what, Ren Baqian should still be alive. It would be better for him to persuade Ren Baqian to at least be alive. In less than 5 minutes, a red shadow appeared on the city wall. A glass bottle smashed into Ren Baqian's chest and almost knocked him off the wall. What exactly is going on? Thank you, Your Majesty. Ren Baqian was grabbed by Li Qianqiu. After stabilizing himself, he held the wine bottle and laughed. It's indeed fireworks. Your Majesty, you should be able to see them in a while, Ren Baqian said. That better be the case. The Empress squinted her eyes. Li Qianqiu's jaw dropped for a long time. Her Majesty actually didn't beat him up? What a great show of love. If he were to say this, Her Majesty would definitely kick him into the Great Xia barracks. Sure enough, different people had different fates. How much longer do I have to wait? The Empress started to get impatient after standing there for less than a minute. She was already gentle enough after being woken up from her sleep. Very soon. Ren Baqian listened to the sound of the soldiers carrying heavy objects moving forward from the monitor. Put it here. The voice from the walkie-talkie made Ren Baqian's eyes light up. He opened the bottle and asked the Empress, Your Majesty, do you want a drink? It can keep you warm. Seeing that the Empress was ignoring him, he took a sip. The erguoto went down his throat like a knife. Ha! Ren Baqian spat out the smell of alcohol. Sir Li, do you want a drink? As soon as Ren Baqin finished speaking, his hand was empty. The wine bottle was in Li Qianqiu's hand. He gulped it down and exclaimed, "Good wine. What a strong wine. After this war I will give you 10 bottles." Ren Baqin said generously, "Thank you in advance." Li Qianqiu laughed heartily. This wine was good stuff. "Is this the thing that keeps making sounds?" A vigorous voice came from the walkie-talkie. "General, this is it." Ren Baqin laughed heartily. His plan had finally succeeded. "Have you been surrounded? Are they talking about themselves? Are they sparing us? They are just a group of dying people. Let's attack tomorrow and destroy Liao City in one fell swoop. Let's see what they have to say then. However, it's rare that this thing can actually talk." General is right. Now that there are 30,000 more soldiers cutting down trees to make ladders, there won't be a shortage of ladders anymore. This time we will definitely be able to destroy Liao City in one fell swoop. I can be proud when I think of Qi Zixiao fleeing in panic. That's true. From the sound of it, there were quite a lot of people. The more they discussed, the happier Ren Baqin was. That general from before and this marquis are definitely the targets. As for the other small fries, we can earn as much as we can. This statue looks familiar. Is this the 7th prince? I saw him once before he went to Dayo a year ago and he does look similar. Why did they make a statue of the 7th prince? I heard that the 7th prince looks very similar to that poison warrior. Could this be that poison warrior? Sending his own statue here. Could it be that it's poisonous? It's not poisonous. I have just checked it. Then what's the meaning of this statue? That poison warrior must have a reason for doing this. Wu Xingho's voice was heard again. Ren Baqin hummed a tune, took out another walkie-talkie from the box, pressed a button and sang intoxicatedly, "Because I happen to meet you. Leaving footprints is beautiful. The wind blows the flowers and tears fall like rain because I don't want to be separated." When Ren Baqin's voice was transmitted through the loudspeaker, everyone in the Great Xia tent was shocked. After hearing the lyrics clearly, everyone turned pale and looked at Wu Xingho in shock. "Happen to meet you? Leaving footprints is beautiful? The wind blows the flowers and tears fall like rain? Because I don't want to be separated?" What the hell was this? It was terrifying to think about it. Everyone was shocked, but many of them felt that this strange voice was very pleasant to hear. This made everyone even more shocked. Who's trying to be mysterious? Wu Xingho shouted with an ashen face. "Because I happen to meet you. Leaving a 10-year promise. If we meet again I think I will remember you." As Ren Baqin sang affectionately, he held a button, unlocked the safety and pressed it with his thumb. A huge explosion immediately occurred in the Great Xia camp. It was bigger than all the previous explosions. Huge flames shot up into the sky, and the shock wave swept out in all directions like a storm. After that, everyone on the city wall heard a loud boom. Even the city wall was shaking. Even many people in the city were awakened by the vibration from the explosion in the distance. Ren Baqin put down the walkie-talkie and said to the guard beside him, "Write it down. Great Xia's Wu Xingho. Cause of death. Too much curiosity, too little knowledge, and ignorance limited his imagination." Ren Baqin took the wine bottle from Li Qianqiu, took a sip, turned to the Empress and asked, "Your Majesty, do you like the fireworks?" "Can he survive?" the Empress asked. "From the sound it should be within 10 meters. He definitely won't survive," Ren Baqin said with certainty. The Empress nodded. She then thought for a while and said, "The song just now is not bad. Sing it for me 100 times. Chapter 369. The Empress was distracted. Ren Baqin gave himself a thumbs up. Li Qianqiu looked at the huge explosion in the distance and suddenly thought of something. He dove into the darkness in a flash, stirred up all the blood in his body and shouted, "Assemble at the north gate." After he finished shouting, he used his hand to press down on the tent protruding from his waist and abdomen before strolling out as if nothing had happened. Ren Baqin suddenly remembered that the most important thing hadn't been done yet. He asked the guards to move his mortars and artillery shells over. This time he had to finish this battle in one fell swoop. Although Li Qianqiu was a spirit wheel expert, he rarely fought with others because the martial arts he practiced had a huge flaw. When he exerted force, his entire body would be congested with blood. As a result, Li Qianqiu had a nickname in private, which was Immortal Spear. Although his weapon of choice was a double-sided giant axe, his nickname was Immortal Spear. From this one could see his style. Among the 5 protectorates he was definitely outstanding. In less than 5 minutes, all the winged cavalry warriors arrived at the north gate. The previous explosion had already awakened them, and they thought that something had happened. All of them carried their weapons and went straight to the north gate upon hearing the shouts. Li Qianqiu got someone to open the gate and said in a deep voice, "Great Xia's commander Wu Xingho is dead and the barracks are in chaos. Charge! Charge! We will not return without victory." The Empress said faintly as she looked at the chaotic Great Xia barracks in the distance. 1,100 winged cavalry warriors rushed madly toward the Great Xia barracks. After another 5 minutes, the other 3,000 soldiers from the Protectorate of the Center arrived. Li Qianqiu jumped down from the city wall, landed in front of everyone and said, "Great Xia's commander Wu Xingho is dead and the winged cavalry has set off. All generals will lead the barracks to attack the main barracks first, then turn around and defeat the reinforcements from the left and right barracks." Although they had been in a daze for some time, the other two barracks of Great Xia were even slower to react. Those soldiers hadn't even reached the man-wheel level, so it would take longer for them to reinforce the northern barracks. The time difference was enough for the 3,000 soldiers to attack first before turning back to face the attack. At this time, the sky wasn't bright yet, and Great Xia didn't have time to prepare and couldn't get into formation in a short period of time. If both sides met, the powerful strength of the aboriginals could be fully unleashed. Moreover, with the emergency reinforcements and the dark sky, more than half of the enemy's archers had been crippled. Under such circumstances, it wasn't difficult for 3,000 soldiers to defeat 20,000 to 30,000 Great Xia soldiers. Yes. The generals in the army replied and led the 3,000 soldiers out of the city. "Sir, what are we going to do?" A few burly ancient race men wearing leather armor asked. These people were the leaders of the newly established militia in Liao City. The strongest among them had already attained the earthwheel level. "Get ready to snatch the food." Ren Baqian was the first to speak. Currently there weren't many rations left in the city, and a batch of Great Xia's rations had just arrived. In a while, after they defeated the Great Xia army, they could snatch the rations back. As for defending the city, there was no need. There were a total of 40,000 soldiers in the east and west barracks of Great Xia's army. Their main task was to reinforce the north barracks, and it would already be considered pretty good if they could leave 5,000 soldiers to defend their barracks. They simply wouldn't have the energy to attack the city. Even if they didn't care about the survival of the north barracks and directly attack the city, the aboriginal commoners in the city would be enough to take a bite out of them. When the main army returned, they would be like turtles in a jar. "Yes, sir." The leaders of the militia immediately responded. "Let's go out of the city too." Ren Baqian called out to the guards beside him. Everyone rode on the fork-horned cows and headed out of the city. As soon as they left the city, a few people were sent out with night vision devices and walkie-talkies to check the location of the reinforcements from the other two barracks. On the other hand, Ren Baqian found a place to set up the mortars. In the distance, the sounds of fighting could already be heard from the Great Xia barracks. Originally, that explosion had already wiped out all the generals in the north barracks, leaving only a few captains. Colonels, on the other hand, were usually battalion-level commanding officers, commanding 800 to 1,200 people. Regardless of whether it was in terms of strength or prestige, the captains in the barracks weren't able to calm the chaos in the barracks in a short period of time. Needless to say, they were already out of their wits. Then, 1,100 earthwheel-level winged cavalry warriors rushed in and killed anyone they saw. The outcome of an ordinary person facing an earthwheel expert was imaginable. Even after defending the city for such a long time, the winged cavalry didn't suffer many casualties. From this, the disparity in strength could be seen. If there was someone who could command the army, they might be able to cause some trouble. However, at this moment, the higher-ups had already been wiped out. Coupled with the sudden attack of the winged cavalry, the barracks were filled with wails and howls. At this moment, another 3,000 aboriginal soldiers rushed in, and the Great Xia barracks became even more chaotic. "Sir, the Great Xia soldiers from the east barracks have already left the barracks. The vanguard consists of 1,000 cavalrymen, but I can't tell how many there are at the back. However, more than half of the barracks are empty." A moment after the east barracks set off, the Great Xia soldiers from the west barracks also set off. However, the commander of the west barracks was even more decisive. He didn't leave a single person behind, and the entire army rushed straight to the north barracks to provide support. "Prepare to meet the enemy," Li Qianqiu ordered through the walkie-talkie. After rushing into the barracks for a round of killing, the 3,000 aboriginal soldiers immediately returned to the empty space to assemble and began to advance in the direction of the east barracks. Countless torches were shining in that direction. However, just as they left the barracks, they encountered 1,000 cavalrymen rushing over at high speed. Countless soldiers wielding long swords intersected with the cavalrymen at high speed, causing the cavalrymen to fall off their horses and be trampled into mud by the horses behind them. However, these cavalrymen more or less delayed some time. When the great Xia soldiers at the back discovered that they had encountered the enemy, a portion of them had already formed a battle formation. The soldiers that arrived one after another added to the thickness of the battle formation. Kill. The aboriginal soldiers looked at the countless human figures illuminated by the torches in front of them and roared as they pounced over. However, the cannonballs were even faster than them. 6 cannonballs landed directly in the battle formation, immediately causing people and horses to be thrown off their feet. The battle formation was also shaken. The aboriginal soldiers took advantage of this opportunity to pounce in and set off a reign of terror. There wasn't any suspense in the battle between 3,000 aboriginal soldiers and 10,000 Great Xia elites. After 30 minutes, the Great Xia soldiers began to crumble. Stop chasing and kill. The rear army will become the front army and head northwest. Li Qianxiu conveyed the order. Very soon, long whistles were heard on the battlefield. The soldiers who were chasing and killing the enemy gathered together and headed northwest at high speed. The front army was under the greatest pressure during the attack. As such, when they faced another enemy army, the front and rear armies were swapped. Otherwise, even if they were man-will experts, it would be difficult for them to immediately carry out another round of attacks after being the tip of a sword to break the enemy's formation. This time, the opponent was 20,000 Great Xia soldiers from the West Barracks. After both sides met, Rinpoche fired another round of cannonballs. This time he fired 10 rounds and disrupted the enemy's battle formation. However, the Great Xia soldiers from the West Barracks were split into 2. One of them was entangled with the aboriginal soldiers, or rather, they were slaughtered. The other group sped up and headed toward the North Barracks in an attempt to be the first to enter the barracks. Foolish method, Li Qianxiu commented. They have no other choice. Rinpoche sat on the ground. The result of a clash between 20,000 Great Xia soldiers and 3,000 aboriginal soldiers in the dark was obvious. The North Barracks still had 70,000 soldiers and 30,000 laborers. If they could gather some of the remaining soldiers, they could still fight. If they didn't rescue the North Barracks, Dayo could directly flatten this army of 20,000 soldiers. Therefore, after finding out that something had happened to the North Barracks, they immediately sent all of their troops to rescue them. After discovering that they were intercepted, they abandoned a portion of their troops. Even though they knew that these aboriginal soldiers would soon catch up, they still had to give it a try. This was because there was no better way to deal with the current situation. Should we get rid of the generals of these 2 barracks first? It's easy to get 1,000 soldiers, but it's hard to find a good general. With so many generals dying in succession, Great Xia won't be able to reorganize the defeated army in a short period of time. If the 2 generals of the East and West Barracks run away, it's very likely that a large number of soldiers can be gathered in a short period of time, Rinpoche asked. I'll make a trip. Li Qianxiu touched his chin. He didn't even bring his weapon as he disappeared into the darkness. Not long after Li Qianxiu left, a winged cavalry warrior in front sent back a message through a walkie-talkie that they had encountered an obstruction. The other party was a god-level expert. Although he was injured, more than 30 winged cavalry warriors had died at his hands. The other party might be the legendary Lu Pinghai. When Rinpoche heard this news, the Empress naturally heard it as well. Her whole body erupted with a soaring killing intent. She first returned to the city commander's residence in a flash. When she came out again, she was already holding a longbow and a quiver of bone arrows. She transformed into a red shadow and appeared in the empty space between Liao City and the North Barracks. In a flash, she appeared dozens of meters in the air with a bow in one hand and an arrow in the other. Lu Qi, I was worried that I couldn't find you. Today I'll send you to heaven. Chapter 370. Lu Pinghai had just arrived at the barracks with the army in the afternoon. He wanted to make a move at the crucial moment, but he didn't expect the barracks to be destroyed on the first night. This made him feel rather unlucky. He came out of his tent and looked at the chaotic barracks. He was still pondering whether he should head out of Tiesua Pass or return to Great Xia. He preferred the latter option, but he didn't fulfill his promise to the Emperor of Great Xia and felt a little embarrassed. Although the keepsake used by the other party was a joke when he was young, he didn't expect that someone would know its use and find him after so many years. However, since the keepsake was in the other party's hands, He would help him do 3 things if the other party could afford it. At the thought of this, Lu Pinghai reminisced about the past. Old people were always like this. At that time he had just entered the martial arts world. He stayed in a very strange inn and was hired to help people kill. He remembered that the first person who hired him paid a basket of eggs and a pair of shoes. At that time he didn't even have shoes. His attacks were fast and ruthless enough, so it didn't take long for him to earn the nickname of Quick Sword. Later, he left the inn because of a sentence from a very good-looking man. After so many years, he had forgotten the man's appearance. He only remembered his eyes, which were as clear as a child's. And that man's name Yichio. Later he made a name for himself and met that man again. He gave him a puppet that he carved. It was that man. He said that as long as the other party could afford it, he would help him do 3 things. Unfortunately, that man didn't look for him. Then he heard that he was dead. He avenged him but only lost a finger. From then on he could no longer use a sword, and Quick Sword Lu Chi disappeared. Instead he was replaced by Lu Chi with 9 fingers. Later no one called him 9 Fingers or Lu Chi anymore. Everyone only knew him as the 8th most powerful expert in the world, Lu Pinghai. Just as he was reminiscing about the journey to the west, the surrounding Great Xia soldiers all ran away and were replaced by a group of tall and burly winged cavalry warriors. Their arms were big enough to run a horse and their fists were big enough to stand on. Then there was no then. Lu Pinghai discovered the Empress when she appeared in the sky. If he couldn't discover her at such a close distance, then he would be one of the top 10 experts in the world. He merely glanced at the Empress in the air before using his sleeves to form a long rod and striking the chests of the 2 winged cavalry warriors. The 2 winged cavalry warriors immediately flew backward and spat out blood. A moment ago this pair of sleeves had transformed into a saber, a spear, a sword, and a staff. His divine weapon was precisely this pair of sleeves, and it was known as the 1,000 silk sleeves. It could change into tens of thousands of different forms, and it could be used as he wished. After sending the 2 winged cavalry warriors flying, Lu Pinghai flew backward. Lu Chi, I was worried that I couldn't find you. Today I shall send you to heaven. The Empress knocked an arrow and shot. As soon as he left, a hole of unknown depth appeared on the ground. Only then did the surrounding people feel the wind brought by the bone arrows blowing on their faces, and a series of explosion-like sounds. The arrow was faster than sound. Chi. Lu Pinghai only managed to utter a single word before his silhouette flickered. Several bone arrows left a row of holes in the ground behind him. Z. Lu Pinghai squeezed out a word from between his teeth before continuing to flee. Several more holes appeared on the ground behind him. Shao. Lu Pinghai dragged his voice as he fled. The quiver in the Empress's hands was half empty. Her speed was almost the same as Rinpoche's machine gun. Crazy woman. Before Lu Pinghai could finish his sentence, he was showered with arrows. He cursed in his heart and broke into a run. The Empress landed on the ground first. When a few winged cavalry warriors saw her, they immediately cupped their hands and greeted, "Your Majesty." Following which, the Empress disappeared like the wind, along with the quiver of 5 or 6 winged cavalry warriors. Lu Pinghai stayed close to the ground, and his speed was so fast that the surrounding people couldn't see him clearly. On the other hand, every time the Empress leaped into the air and shot half of the quiver, she would jump up again after landing. She was like a goshawk hunting for a wild rabbit, and her eyes were glued to Lu Pinghai's back. The sound of arrows exploding in the air traveled from the center of the barracks to the north. After the Empress shot the arrows, she hung the bow on her back. Her whole body began to turn red, and streaks of purple tattoo-like lines appeared on her face. Her speed immediately increased by several notches. Qi Xiao. Hongwu isn't dead yet. How much hatred do you have? Lu Pinghai felt that something was amiss. He turned around and saw the lines on the Empress's face from afar. She was chasing after him at a speed that was 30% faster than his. Although he didn't know the specific martial arts of Qi Xiao, he had heard of this situation. This was clearly a secret technique used by aboriginals to burn their blood essence when they were fighting for their lives. That day Hongwu used this technique. If he didn't drag it out until Hongwu was exhausted, he was afraid that his injuries would have been more serious than Hongwu's. Qi Xiao burned her blood essence the moment she saw him. How much hatred did she have? Furthermore, this kind of secret technique was also divided into different grades. The higher the grade, the longer the duration and the lesser the repercussions. He didn't think that the Empress's martial arts would be inferior to Hongwu's, so his heart suddenly trembled. The Empress's face was ice cold. Without saying a word, she stomped hard on the ground. A rock the size of a fork-horned cow was first covered with cracks, and then with a loud bang, it shattered into pieces. If I say I'm going to kill you, then I'm definitely going to kill you. The two of them chased and fled, getting further and further away from Liao City. The distance between the Empress and Lu Pinghai was less than 20 meters. Lu Pinghai had no choice but to turn around and exchange a punch with the Empress. After that, he flew backward and borrowed the force of the collision to increase the distance between them. However, every collision made him feel as if he was swung by a giant hammer. Now he knew why Hua Sanlu died in the hands of Qi Zixiao. Not only was she extremely strong, but she was also extremely fast. It was extremely difficult to escape. Now it depended on how long Qi Zixiao's secret technique could last. Previously Hongwu lasted for an hour. He didn't know how long Qi Zixiao could last. If Qi Zixiao didn't know when to stop, when the time came, Renbaqian would capture her and send her to the Emperor of Great Xia. After another 2 hours, Lu Pinghai had already vomited 3 mouthfuls of blood. However, Qi Zixiao still didn't have the slightest intention of giving up the chase. At this time, the sky had already started to brighten. In front of the two of them was a continuous stretch of barracks. If one were to look from the sky, they would be able to see that this huge barracks surrounded a city. In 2 hours, the two of them ran from Liao City to Tiesua Pass. Looking at the barracks in the distance, Lu Pinghai's mind was racing. If they saw his situation, he would really lose face. However, with Qi Zixiao's current situation, he didn't know how long she could continue the chase, but he was almost at his limit. Running from Liao City to Tiesua Pass in 2 hours. It was a full 400 kilometers. At this time, the speed of the two of them was less than 30% of their initial speed. However, under such circumstances, they still ran more than 400 kilometers in 2 hours. Furthermore, they had to cross over mountains and ridges. Even a spirit wheel expert couldn't afford such exhaustion. Qi Zixiao is here. Help her quickly. Lu Pinghai seized the opportunity to shout. However, this breath of air caused him to slow down. He turned around and used his sleeves to block 6 consecutive punches from the Empress. While vomiting blood in the air, he fell toward the barracks in front of him. Lu Pinghai's shout alarmed countless people in the Great Xia barracks. Immediately, there was a commotion, and dozens of figures immediately jumped out of the barracks. It's Lu Pinghai and Qi Zixiao, the people who jumped out of the barracks exclaimed upon seeing the two of them. She's exhausted from running from Liao City to here in 2 hours. Quickly attack, Lu Pinghai shouted while vomiting blood. He felt extremely bitter. This Qi Zixiao was actually so powerful. As soon as he said this, those figures immediately became restless. Furthermore, 2 more figures landed outside the barracks. When the others saw them, they felt confident. Although they weren't the top 10 experts, they were still spirit wheel experts. Normally, they wouldn't be able to defeat Qi Zixiao. However, after running from Liao City to here in 2 hours, Qi Zixiao was probably at the end of her rope. Attack! Someone shouted, and dozens of figures rushed toward the two of them. The Empress didn't care and stared at Lu Pinghai. The purple veins on her face became denser and darker. Drops of blood seeped out from the surface of her skin. When Lu Pinghai saw her like this, he really wanted to curse in his heart. Was there a need to be so desperate? What kind of hatred and resentment did she have? Wasn't it enough to chase him for 2 hours? Now that she was at the end of her rope, she even burned her blood essence? At this point, the Empress didn't care about anyone else. After catching up with Lu Pinghai, she sent him flying with a series of punches. Then she leaped into the air and stepped on Lu Pinghai's body as he flew backward. With a loud bang, she landed in the Great Xia barracks. Lu Pinghai smashed a hole in the ground. Blood spurted out from his mouth and nose, but he was still able to turn over and jump out. Then he broke into a run. He could tell that Qi Zixiao wasn't just risking her life. She was simply exchanging her life. The Empress caught up with Lu Pinghai again, grabbed his shoulders with both hands and kept rushing forward. Tents, fences, turrets and everything else were like paper. Under the impact of the Empress's charge, they were all smashed into pieces. Lu Pinghai was vomiting blood while making intimate contact with all kinds of things. Looking from the sky, the Empress looked like a yellow dragon behind her. The Empress and Lu Pinghai were the heads of the dragon. Beside the yellow dragon, there were dozens of people chasing after it. 2 of the spirit wheel experts used weapons. One of them used a sword while the other raised his hand. A 1-meter-long wooden pillar appeared in the air and crashed into the Empress's back. The Empress didn't seem to care at all. After being hit 3 times in a row, her speed increased with each hit. However, on the 3rd hit she also vomited blood. At this point in time, the Empress looked extremely horrifying. Her exposed skin was almost covered with purple veins. Tiny beads of blood seeped out of her skin and dyed her white inner clothes red. However, she held onto Lu Pinghai tightly and didn't let him move an inch. She carried him as she charged forward, creating a straight line in the Great Xia barracks. Human bodies, fences, city gates, houses and courtyard walls. Just like a bulldozer, everything in front of her was destroyed. Just like that, she crashed into Tiesua Pass. Hongwu felt that the aura outside was somewhat familiar. Just as he came out of the residence, he saw a red figure carrying a person as it charged in front of him. The figure knocked him to the ground, passed through the residence, and headed from the south to the north gate. Hongwu was almost scared to death. He hurriedly chased after the Empress and shouted, "Your Majesty, Your Majesty." However, the Empress couldn't hear him at this point. Her eyes had turned completely black and not a trace of light could be seen. Chapter 371. As soon as the Empress woke up, she felt a sharp pain in her body. Every cell in her body was groaning in intense pain. If it were someone else, they would have screamed. The Empress opened her eyes to look at the ceiling, then turned her head and saw Hongwu guarding by the bed. "Your Majesty." Hongwu didn't know what to say when he saw that the Empress had woken up. He never imagined that the Empress would chase Lu Qi all the way from Liao City to here, risking serious injuries, and push him all the way from the Great Xia barracks to the city. If he hadn't stopped her, she would have pushed him all the way to Great Xia. "Is Lu Qi dead?" the Empress asked directly. Her tone was cold and no one could tell that she was in pain. However, how could Hongwu, who had just exploded not long ago, not know? "Although he's not dead, he's going to die soon." "I've detained him," Hongwu replied. "Kill him." The Empress decided the fate of Lu Pinghai. No matter how strong he was, she wouldn't treat him with respect and make him her subordinate. Since she wanted to kill him, she had to kill him. "Your Majesty, it's too dangerous," Hongwu said in a deep voice. "Your Majesty is the ruler of a nation, how can you do such a thing? If anything happens to you, not to mention one Lu Qi, even 10 Lu Qis won't be able to stop you. What will happen to Dayo then? What will happen to the millions of people?" "I won't die," the Empress said faintly. She was still conscious when she was in the Great Xia barracks, but at that time she was really exhausted. She burned her blood essence and rushed to the city gate. She only lost consciousness when she crashed into the city gate. Otherwise, how could she be so accurate? Even so, why do you have to do this? With your status, how can you take such a risk? Hongwu's face was filled with grief. He had watched the Empress grow up and was closer to her than his own. How could he remain indifferent when she was in such a state? "Lu Qi is too dangerous," the Empress said faintly. Unless he and Hongwu were in the same place, Lu Qi would be in great danger no matter which troop he was in. Although she didn't know how Great Xia managed to make Lu Qi work for them, she couldn't leave such an expert in the hands of Great Xia. The Aboriginals didn't have many soldiers to begin with, and their biggest reliance was their powerful individual strength. They were most afraid of encountering a super expert like Lu Qi. It would be fine if the other party was an ordinary spirit wheel expert. However, no one would be able to stop a super expert like Lu Qi unless he encountered her or Hongwu. Previously he tried to assassinate Hongwu and this time he appeared in the Great Xia army. This already explained some things. It was too dangerous to have a super expert like him in the Great Xia army. Since he had met him, he must not let him live. Not to mention there were other grudges between them, so it was even more impossible to keep him alive. However, there was no need to talk about this. "Your Majesty, are you trying to avenge me? If that's the case, I really deserve to die for putting your Majesty in such danger." Hongwu's sudden tone of flattery made the Empress's head throb. "You're thinking too much. If you keep talking, I'll kill you," the Empress said coldly. If it wasn't for the fact that her entire body was in pain and she couldn't move freely, she would have kicked this old man out. "No matter what, your Majesty must not do this again." Hongwu sighed. "I won't die," the Empress replied faintly. "I want to see Lu Qi's head. That will make me feel better." Hongwu was touched when he left the door. His eyes were filled with tears. "Your Majesty, are you trying to avenge me? Are you really trying to avenge me? Otherwise it doesn't make sense. Your Majesty is willing to take such a risk for me. My painstaking efforts over the years aren't in vain. The little girl from back then is already so powerful." At the thought of this, another person popped up in Hongwu's mind. It's a pity that that bastard is going to benefit from it. At this moment, Hongwu hated Rinpoche to the core, even though he was indeed quite useful. For example, a radio station, a drone, a walkie-talkie, a telescope, and he even heard that salt was produced recently. However, being useful and hating were two different things. He definitely wouldn't let that fellow off. After a while, Hongwu came back with a human head with a bloody nose and a swollen face. The head was full of meat lumps. "Is this Lu Qi?" the Empress asked suspiciously as she lay on the bed. He didn't look like Lu Qi. "Your Majesty, it's indeed Lu Qi." Hongwu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Lu Qi was really unlucky to have been used as a shield by Her Majesty. He even smashed through the city gate, which was 1.5 feet thick, and even created holes in the stone walls and houses of his residence. He was already very lucky to be alive. Of course, this was also because Lu Qi was seriously injured at that time and was on the verge of death. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been in such a miserable state. A spirit wheel expert, especially one at Lu Qi's level, had physical strength that ordinary practitioners couldn't measure. However, even though he didn't die at that time, he couldn't be any more dead now. It was a pity that such an expert actually died in such a manner. "Oh." The Empress nodded. Since Hongwu said it was Lu Qi, then it was Lu Qi. The Empress then thought of something else and asked, "Is there anything else on him?" "He has this." Hongwu took out a wooden box. "What is it?" the Empress asked. "A spirit yuan pill and his martial arts, as well as the method to condense his 1,000-thread sleeves." Hongwu opened the box and revealed a thin book. Underneath it was a jade box that contained a red elixir. There were circles of veined patterns on the elixir, but it didn't emit any fragrance. It was as if it had been completely absorbed into the elixir. Hongwu showed the spirit yuan pill to the Empress, closed the box and placed it next to the Empress. Then Hongwu suddenly thought of something and asked, "Your Majesty, don't tell me that you are going to snatch the spirit yuan pill for that fellow? If that's the case, I will kill him with one slap." "You are thinking too much," the Empress said faintly. "Your Majesty, you have only known that fellow for less than a year." Hongwu's face was full of grief. A grown girl really couldn't be kept at home. "I will beat you to death if you speak again." The Empress gritted her teeth in hatred. Why didn't she realize that this old man was so annoying in the past? At the same time, she secretly swore that when she could move again, she would definitely kick this old man out. After sighing for a long time, Hongwu suppressed the thought that a grown girl couldn't be kept at home and asked about the situation in Liao City. Previously, when the Empress chased Rinpoche here, he asked about the situation in Liao City. However, it was said that the army had killed their way out, and the people left in the city commander's residence didn't know much. Now that the Empress had woken up, it was the right time to ask her. "Wu Shengho is dead," the Empress said faintly. Then she roughly explained what happened that night. There were many things that she didn't understand, so she didn't say anything. Hongwu only knew that Rinpoche made something that was carried back to the barracks by the Great Xia army. Subsequently, Wu Shengho and most of the high-ranking generals died. The winged cavalry and Li Qianqiu's troops defeated the Great Xia army and killed their way through. Upon hearing this, Hongwu was overjoyed. The entire plan for Great Xia's southern invasion was made by Wu Shengho. Now that he was dead, it wouldn't be easy for Great Xia to find someone to replace him. As long as the Great Xia army in Tiesua Pass and Shun City was restrained, the winged cavalry and Li Qianqiu's troops, as well as the 3,500 garrison soldiers and reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South, which consisted of 11,000 soldiers and more than 1,000 winged cavalry warriors, were sufficient to wipe out the Great Xia army in the north of Dayo. At that time, the siege of Tiesua Pass and Shun City would naturally be lifted. This time, Great Xia could be said to have suffered heavy casualties and gained nothing. One had to know that Great Xia had already invested 700,000 soldiers, and there were 180,000 soldiers outside Tiesua Pass and Shun City. Originally, Wu Shengho had 110,000 soldiers, and Dayo had 140,000 soldiers, a total of 430,000 soldiers. Now that Wu Shengho was dead, the Great Xia army was being massacred along the way, and only half of them could escape. If the two armies in Dayo were to be annihilated, the Great Xia army in the south would only be left with about 200,000 soldiers, and they might not be able to cope with the Aboriginals' attack in the future. After the two sides talked, Hongwu left in joy with the head. A moment later, the radio was sent to the room at the Empress's request. At this moment, Rinpoche was sitting on top of the city wall. The winged cavalry had already killed their way out. After defeating the two reinforcements, the 3,000 soldiers also chased after them to the north. At this moment, the thousands of guards in the east barracks simply ignored them. They were afraid that they would sneak away quietly. The city sent some militia to the north barracks to collect rations and fodder. Meanwhile, he was waiting here for the Empress to return. It has already been 8 hours, right? Rinpoche calculated the time. He didn't know where Her Majesty had chased Lu Qi to, and she actually hadn't returned after so long. The distance was too far and the walkie-talkie couldn't be contacted. However, with the Empress's strength, as long as she didn't barge into the Great Xia army alone, she would be able to return safely no matter where she went. Suddenly, someone hurriedly ran to the city wall and reported, "Sir Rin, Her Majesty is at Tiesua Pass." Why did Her Majesty go there? Rinpoche was flabbergasted. "Her Majesty is using the radio to contact you and is waiting for you," that soldier replied. Rinpoche hurriedly rushed back to the city commander's residence. "Your Majesty? Why did you go to Tiesua Pass? Why do you care why I'm here?" The Empress rarely lost her temper. Her body was already hurting, yet you still asked such nonsense. "Your Majesty, you are the boss and you have the final say." Rinpoche immediately admitted his mistake. "I will guard this place for a few days. Come and pick me up after you have eliminated the enemy troops," the Empress said in a cold tone. "Yes. At that time, I will ride on a rainbow cloud to pick you up." Chapter 372. Rinpoche sat at the top of the city wall and watched the militia excitedly pushing carts of rations back. There was also a large herd of cows and sheep. Even though the ordinary soldiers of Great Xia ate rations, some practitioners still ate meat. Even though their appetites weren't as big as the aboriginals, they still ate quite a lot. "What are the arrangements?" Rinpoche tilted his head and asked. "Distribute the rations to the commoners and bring the livestock with you," Licentio said. The commoners could still eat the rations, but if the soldiers ate them, they wouldn't have to do anything else and would have to eat from morning to night. At noon, the soldiers of the Protectorate of the Center returned. All of them were so hungry that their faces were twitching. The winged cavalry only returned in the afternoon. Dozens of kilometers to the north of the North Barracks were covered with the corpses of Great Xia soldiers. If they weren't so hungry, they would have chased them for another day. It had been a month. They had been besieged for a month, and they could finally vent their anger. Just as Rinpoche had expected, the guards in the East Barracks had slipped away in the morning. The soldiers in the city didn't go after them, so they took advantage of the situation. "Get someone to bury them. Otherwise it will be troublesome if a plague breaks out," Rinpoche said. Licentio nodded. They understood this principle. Along the way down from the city wall, Rinpoche heard people asking, "Did they win? The Great Xia army has escaped. When are we going to attack them?" Similar remarks were made. The aboriginal commoners were far more concerned about being besieged by Great Xia than about being defeated. To these boorish people, being besieged by Great Xia for a month was a huge disgrace. As for the casualties, the aboriginals didn't care much about it. Or rather, everyone believed in the existence of the spirits of their ancestors and weren't that afraid of death. Just like the believers of some religions on earth, they weren't afraid of death. Instead, they believed that they would welcome a better home after death. All of these showed that the aboriginals were extraordinarily ambitious. The faces of the commoners in the city were filled with joy and hearty laughter. Their voices were much louder, especially when carts of grain were being transported into the city. The commoners who were running out of grain were very excited. Many people stuck their heads out of their homes to look. As for other things, such as young girls throwing themselves at him to express their excitement when they saw him in his official robes, or celebrating joyfully, there were none. Everyone did what they were supposed to do. When the soldiers returned to the barracks, they began to eat and then lay down to sleep. Some of the commoners helped to deal with the rations, while the rest of them hung their clothes and beat their children. In the hearts of the commoners, it was just defeating an enemy. If you yell, it will be a joke. The children of the aboriginals are really tough. Rinpoche saw a woman carrying a 7 or 8-year-old child by the neck and throwing him out of the courtyard. "Go out and have fun. Don't cause trouble here." That child rolled on the ground, patted the dust off his body, bared his shiny front teeth at Rinpoche, yelled and ran away. Was she his real mother? Rinpoche was a little curious about what the Empress would be like when he and the Empress had a child in the future. From the Empress's character, it was very likely that the child would watch her eat snacks, eat candy, or watch her binge-watch dramas. Rinpoche rubbed his face as he imagined such a scene. It was better not to think so much. In the end, there was a celebration at night, but it was organized by Rinpoche. After all, it was his first time experiencing war. After a month of arduous defending the city, the soldiers shed their blood, and the people in the city were united. Finally, despite the huge disparity in numbers, they won with great difficulty. They had to celebrate. There was no wine in the army, but there was enough meat. After slaughtering half of the livestock that was brought over from the Great Xia barracks, the entire army finally had their fill and was in a jubilant mood. There were dozens of circles in the barracks. In each circle there were shirtless burly men fighting without any rules. From time to time, someone would be thrown out of the crowd, causing a series of excited howls. Next. Who's next? Ren Baqin held the bottle of wine left behind by the Empress and watched the freestyle fight. After drinking a bottle of wine, he directly lay on the ground. The bustling night passed. The next day the results of the battle were tallied. In this battle, more than half of Great Xia's casualties were lost, while the Aboriginals' losses were negligible. The biggest casualties were the dozens of winged cavalry warriors who died at the hands of Lu Pinghai. But on this day new information came back. Sir, there's news from the Protectorate of the Northeast. The Yun nation has sent their troops and has arrived at the front lines. Ren Baqin grinned after hearing this. This was great. He didn't even have to find an excuse. After fighting with Great Xia for more than a month, the Yun nation didn't make any moves. Even though Great Xia had the upper hand and Dayo was defending step by step, the Yun nation was still there studying. Now that the war was almost over, you made a move. If I don't beat you up, I would be letting down my conscience. Even courting death wouldn't be as professional as you. Sure enough, you can't even get a hot piece of sh*t. Li Chinchou laughed when he heard this news. He had the same thoughts as Ren Baqin. This was the worst time for the Yun nation to send their troops. If it was earlier, Great Xia would still have the upper hand. If it was later, they might have already received detailed information about the Great Xia army and would reconsider sending their troops. Everyone in Dayo was very interested in going to the Yun nation to plunder. However, Ren Baqin knew that this wasn't just a simple plunder. After dealing with Great Xia, the next step was to conquer the Yun nation and incorporate it into Dayo's territory. The Yun nation's mines and salt fields were very important to Dayo. Li Chinchou made some arrangements before leading the army out of the city to the south to encircle and annihilate the two Great Xia armies. Ren Baqin waited for half a day and returned to Earth to replenish 100 mortar shells and 1,000 rounds of anti-aircraft machine gun bullets before chasing after the Yun nation with his guards. This time, the number of his guards had increased from 50 to 100. With 100 Earthwheel experts as his guards, as long as they didn't encounter a large group of enemy troops, they would be able to do whatever they wanted. In Great Xia, even the top aristocratic families couldn't come up with such a luxurious lineup. Ren Baqin felt that if he were to bring along 100 guards, he would be able to do whatever he wanted on Earth. After chasing for 3 days, Ren Baqin once again replenished 50 mortar shells and more than 2,000 rounds of anti-aircraft machine gun bullets. With guns in hand, there was no need to panic. With 170 mortar shells and 5,000 rounds of anti-aircraft machine gun bullets, no matter what kind of enemy they encountered, it would be enough. The two armies of Great Xia merged together on the day Ren Baqin returned to Earth and headed north. It seemed like they knew about Wu Xingho's death and the defeat of the army outside Liao City. If they didn't retreat and continued to advance, they would reach the mouth of the Great Xia army in 2 days. If they occupied that place, it would be easy to defend and difficult to attack. However, after the defeat of the Great Xia army in Liao City, they were completely trapped there. Dayo didn't even need to attack. They would starve to death after being besieged for half a month. Therefore, even though they had swept through the northern part of Dayo and were about to occupy the most important place, they had no choice but to retreat. The moment Great Xia's army outside Liao City was defeated, it was already a failure. If there was any good news for Great Xia from this war, it would be that the Yun nation had taken over. Chapter 373. Great Xia. When Xia Bailong received the urgent report from the front line, he immediately smashed the cup in his hand. He still felt angry and overturned the table in the study room. After throwing a tantrum for a long time, he shouted, "This is infuriating." Then he felt a wave of dizziness. His vision turned black and he fell to the ground with a thud. Upon seeing this, the eunuch who was hiding far away hurriedly called for the imperial physician. The palace was in a state of panic. Her Majesty is suffering from anxiety and anger, and her mind is temporarily blocked. I will prescribe some medicine in a while. You guys should also advise Her Majesty not to get angry and to remain calm. The imperial physician left to prescribe the medicine. Half a day had passed by the time Xia Bailong regained consciousness. Water. Xia Bailong muttered, and the eunuch beside him hurriedly served warm water. What time is it? Your Majesty, it's already 5 p.m., the eunuch replied cautiously. Summon the three dukes, the general-in-chief of the army, and the minister of war. Xia Bailong was furious when he recalled the urgent report he saw previously. He felt a headache and quickly pressed his temples with his fingers. Yes, Your Majesty, the imperial physician came just now and said that Your Majesty fainted because of anxiety and anger. You need to remain calm and not get angry. Your Majesty, please take care of your body, the eunuch said cautiously. Go quickly. Xia Bailong said sternly. An hour later, a group of people gathered in this room. Take a look. Xia Bailong threw the piece of paper at the head of the bed. He couldn't help but read it again, but he felt a tightness in his chest after reading it. The imperial tutor took it and saw a few pieces of information written on the first piece of paper. The first one was that Wu Shengho and the generals were dead. Dao took advantage of the situation to break into the barracks and suffered more than half of the casualties. The second one was that Qi Zixiao pursued Lu Pinghai to Tiesua Pass. He broke through the barracks and entered the pass. He was suspected to be seriously injured. Lu Pinghai died and his head was hung at the top of the city wall. The third one was that Lu Pinghai died and the practitioners in the barracks were in an uproar. Lu Pinghai's status and prestige were too high. Now that he was dead, the others couldn't sit still and had the intention to retreat. The fourth piece of news was that the two armies that had entered Dao had already been informed. The two armies had become isolated and were about to be besieged. There were a few pieces of paper at the back that detailed these points, including what they had heard from some of the defeated soldiers. They had found a statue outside the camp that day, and after it was carried back, it exploded, turning the area within a radius of several dozen feet into a sea of fire. There were also countless hidden weapons that shot out from the sea of fire, killing Wu Shengho and many other generals, as well as the details of the Empress's pursuit of Lu Pinghai. After the Grand Preceptor finished reading, he silently passed it to the Grand Tutor beside him. The Grand Tutor then silently passed it to the Grand Protector, who then passed it to the Grand General. The Grand General immediately frowned and passed it to the Minister of War. How could this be? Finally, someone broke the silence in the room. Xia Baichong smashed the cabinet next to him with a slap. Jinling has harmed the country. His family should be demoted and exiled. Your Majesty, you mustn't. Great General Zhao Hongji hurriedly spoke up to stop him. If we do that, I'm afraid the frontline soldiers will be disappointed. Your Majesty, you mustn't do this. The three dukes and the Minister of War also spoke up. My army. Xia Bailong almost couldn't catch his breath. Out of the 700,000 soldiers, only 200,000 were left outside Tiesua Pass. There were still more than 100,000 soldiers within Dao's borders, and he didn't know how many of them would return. A few days ago, he was still full of confidence as he waited for the battle report of his army flattening the north of Dao. Today it turned into a complete loss. How could he tolerate this? He forcibly calmed himself down. He also knew that it was impossible to deal with Wu Shengho. Instead he asked, what should we do next? Does anyone have any ideas? Upon hearing this, the three dukes lowered their eyelids and lowered their heads. They had made up their minds not to speak. It was better for professionals to handle professional matters. Great General Zhao and the Minister of War had a difficult look on their faces. The two of them could even draw the map of Dao with their eyes closed. When they saw the urgent report just now, they immediately knew that unless there was a huge unforeseen event, such as encountering an earth-shaking dragon, this battle was beyond redemption. After a long while, Great General Zhao said, now the only thing we can do is to negotiate with Dao and let the 100,000 soldiers return. Our army will then release the siege of Tiesua Pass and Shun City. After withdrawing we can make new plans. I'm not resigned to this. Xia Bailong hissed. This is only a temporary plan. Looking at the time, the Yun nation should be making their move soon. It just so happens that they can distract Dao's energy. However, in my opinion, even though the Yun nation is well equipped, their soldiers are messy and it's difficult to get orders from the top to the bottom. I'm afraid that they won't be able to hold on for too long. We should step up our efforts to contact the immigrants from the Hao nation and even send some people to help them revolt. At the same time, we can persuade the monarch of the Qin nation to send troops together with us. We might as well give them some benefits. With these few countries distracting Dao, it will be difficult for them to recuperate. Regardless of whether it's their military strength or food supplies, they won't be able to sustain it. At that time, our army will find the right opportunity to march south and defeat the enemy in one fell swoop. After hearing this, Xia Bailong began to ponder. After a while, he raised his head and asked everyone, what do you think of Great General Zhao's plan? Even though I don't know much about military affairs, in my opinion, Great General Zhao's words are wise. This plan is feasible. The imperial tutor nodded his head when he saw Xia Bailong looking at him. I also think it's feasible. Seeing everyone nod their heads, Xia Bailong pondered for a moment. Even though he was still unwilling, this was the only way. Hence, he said, since this is the case, there's no time to lose. Immediately pass down the order and let General Yun Hui inform Dayo about this matter. Tell them to bring back the 100,000 soldiers, withdraw the troops that are surrounding Chiesua Pass and Shun City, and call a temporary truce. After he finished speaking, he raised his head and asked, will Dayo release them? Nobody could answer this question. If it was a normal person, Great Xia would most likely let them go since they proposed a truce. After all, Dayo had suffered a lot of losses. If they continued to fight, even if the two armies were eliminated, Dayo's own casualties would not be small. However, no one could guarantee what the barbarians would decide. Pass down the order first. Xia Bailong frowned and waved his hand. Send a messenger to inform Su Yi that if the Yun nation wants to withdraw their troops, find a way to stabilize them and agree to some of their conditions if necessary. In addition, do you have any good candidates for the envoy to the Qin nation? At this moment, the Yun nation's army had already assembled outside Qingtang Pass, which was far away from Dayo. The entire pass was covered with all kinds of flags. Other than the 200,000 soldiers who were stationed at Qingtang Pass, the rest of the 430,000 soldiers were from various cities in the Yun nation. Some had 20,000 soldiers while others only had 6,000 soldiers. Behind them, there were some soldiers from cities further away who were heading in this direction. Sir, the people from Siwei City and Qinghuan City are fighting. A young general shouted as he strode into a building in the center of Qingtang Pass. A middle-aged man in a long robe was standing there admiring a piece of calligraphy on the wall. Even though it was calligraphy, the sword aura in it was awe-inspiring. Even though this piece of calligraphy had been imprinted in his mind, he would still look at it every day in order to comprehend it. Upon hearing the young general's words, he turned his head and smiled. Has it been settled? It has been settled. However, those fellows are too outrageous. The young general complained. General, I'm afraid that they won't be able to help on the battlefield. Instead, they will retreat when something happens and affect our army. The middle-aged man shook his head slightly. How could he not know that such a patchwork army was unbearable? However, that bunch of people in the imperial court still wanted to retain enough military strength to suppress those warlords. They even wanted to use this opportunity to exhaust the strength of those warlords. Therefore, they simply created such a coalition army. Furthermore, in such a short period of time before the entire army arrived, they had already sent people to urge him to attack as soon as possible. He really didn't know what else was in the minds of those people other than *T. However, these coalition armies each had their own ideas and were indeed difficult to arrange. Even if he was given more time, he wouldn't be able to integrate these coalition armies into an iron plate. Chapter 374. The next day, hundreds of thousands of Yun nation soldiers swarmed toward Sanxi City, which was dozens of miles away. Their flags covered the sky. Although there was some chaos during the march, there was no major trouble. Zidong, the Protectorate of the Northeast Protectorate General, had been waiting for a long time. When they were still 10 miles away from Sanxi City, he opened the city gate and led the army out. They collided with the Yun nation's army. After the vanguard met the enemy, they split into two groups, bypassed the Yun nation's western army in the center, and charged toward the mixed coalition army at the back. The mixed army was well equipped, and even the ordinary soldiers were wearing leather armor. However, the greatest problem was that they lacked a unified command, and all of them wanted to preserve their own strength. As a result, they had only clashed with the enemy for a few moments before they were slaughtered into chaos. The army of more than 100,000 was directly routed by the charge of the 10,000 soldiers of the Protectorate of the Northeast. If not for the Western Garrison Army turning around and launching a pincer attack, they would have lost more than half of their men in this battle. Zidong stood on a hill at the side with a pair of binoculars that were sent to him a few days ago. He sneered as he looked at the Yun nation's army fleeing in all directions. These Yun nation bastards actually dared to attack him. They really didn't know their place. All troops dispersed to both sides and advance 1.5 miles toward the city center. Take a break at Mount Yuguan and Mount Days and wait for orders. Keep your distance from the Western Army. After that, he used his binoculars to carefully observe the Western Garrison Army in the distance. This army was considered the most powerful one in the Yun nation. Their movements were orderly, and their murderous aura soared to the sky. They were indeed considered elites. However, they were only elites in the Yun nation. Zidonglai was interested in a carriage-like thing in the Western Army's formation. On top of it was a box that was as tall and wide as a person, and there were two people standing behind the box. Zhaoyu, Zhaoyang, Jingqian, Chizuo lead the troops and attack. Under Zidonglai's order, 4,000 aboriginal soldiers drew their long sabers and charged toward the Western Army on the Central Plain. There was no hesitation in the 4,000 people attacking the 100,000 people. Zidonglai used the binoculars to watch the Western Army push the carriages to the front of the formation and open the wooden boards at the back, revealing dense arrows. Release. The Western Garrison Army gave the order, and the two people in the carriage immediately pulled the lever next to the box. Countless crossbow bolts shot out from the box, forming a black arrow rain. Kill. The Aboriginal warriors at the very front brandished their long swords and chopped down the arrows that were shot at them. However, there were still some arrows that slipped through and pierced through their bodies. Many soldiers who were hit in vital spots immediately fell to the ground. Even more soldiers who were pierced by arrows only paused for a moment before roaring and charging forward with bloodshot eyes. After a round of shooting, the soldiers with shields and spears immediately passed through the gaps between the carriages, firmly surrounding the carriages. Someone immediately brought a few boxes to the carriage. The boxes were filled with exposed arrow shafts. Someone aimed the arrow shaft at the back of the box and pressed it into the hole left by the crossbow bolt. In just a moment, a quarter of the box was filled. 4 boxes with arrow shafts were pressed on. The box on the carriage was already filled with crossbow bolts. Retreat. Zidonglai ordered. The scene he had just seen had given him an understanding of the use of the carriages in the Yun nation. At least 100 crossbow bolts were shot out in a fan shape, covering a large area. Moreover, their penetrative power was quite high, and their range far exceeded that of a normal crossbow bolt's 100 steps. Even at a distance of 200 steps they were still quite powerful. But in this round at least 200 soldiers had died. The other party only used 6 such carriages in each direction. From what he could see, the Yun nation had at least 60 such carriages. Another point was that this new weapon from the Yun nation could reload the crossbow bolts very quickly. From what he could see, the crossbow bolts could be reloaded after a count of 30. It was indeed a little troublesome to encounter such a weapon in the wilderness. He immediately ordered everyone to bypass the Western City Army and return to the city. He dared to divide his troops into 2 groups to bypass the Western City Army and directly attack the coalition army. He also dared to let them return under the nose of the Western City Army. If the Western City Army dared to chase after them, it would be exactly what he wanted. The crossbow boxes on the carriages could only be used for confrontation between 2 armies and couldn't be used for pursuit. Zidonglai gently tossed the walkie-talkie with one hand and caught it. This thing was indeed a good thing. With this thing it was very convenient to convey orders on the battlefield. It could be directly transmitted to the battalions, and the 10,000 soldiers could be divided into 10 battalions. Rinpoche found out about this battle that night. Under the nose of the Western City Army, Zidonglai divided his troops into 2 groups to bypass the Western City Army and attack the coalition army at the back. Rinpoche didn't know much about Zidonglai, the Protector General of the Northeast, but those who could reach this position weren't easy to deal with. According to the guard beside him, among the 5 protectors, Hongwu, the Protector General of the North, was the most skilled, Licencio, the Protector General of the Central, Shiwanya, the Protector General of the South, and Zhuyu, the Protector General of the Southeast, had never made any mistakes. Many people felt that he didn't look like an aboriginal. Zidonglai, the Protector General of the Northeast, had the coldest temperament and the sharpest use of troops. He was like an incomparably sharp steel knife. Putting aside the matter of the Northeast, Rinpoche wasn't far from Licencio. If he stayed put, he would be able to see Licencio tomorrow night. At present, the Great Xia army was on its way back, and the reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South were still 2 days away. Only the 3,500 soldiers that had been transferred from the various cities were following the Great Xia army from afar. Even with the winged cavalry and the 3,500 soldiers, it would still be difficult for Licencio to directly attack the Great Xia army. One had to know that there were a large number of practitioners in this Great Xia army. If they used the same method as they did outside Ziyue City and the aboriginals were hindered, the archers would fire in unison, greatly increasing the casualties of the aboriginals. After all, the practitioners were far faster than the aboriginal warriors of the same level. Therefore he maintained a distance from the Great Xia army and began to retreat again to join up with Rinpochen. With Rinpochen's mortars disrupting the enemy's formation, the winged cavalry would insert their blades and continue to disrupt the enemy's formation. Li Qianqiu's troops would then be able to expand the enemy's chaos. At that time, the 3,500 soldiers would also attack at the right time. This Great Xia army would be attacked from both front and back and would definitely be defeated. Let's just wait here. It's tiring to run around. Rinpochen immediately decided to stay here after knowing Li Qianqiu's movements. On the afternoon of the next day, Rinpochen met the winged cavalry who was acting as a mounted scout. After being exposed to all kinds of grenades, mortar shells and anti-aircraft machine guns, they felt a little awkward without Rinpochen at their back. Now that they saw the Great Xia army's formation, they immediately thought of looking for Principal Ren. With a round of artillery fire and a round of grenades, the enemy's front line would immediately be shattered. After that, it would be much easier to charge and kill. Not long after, when Rinpochen and Li Qianqiu met up, Li Qianqiu immediately used his huge palms to slap Rinpochen and said, "Principal Rin, I always feel like I'm missing something without you by my side. I'm relieved to see you." As he spoke, he slapped Li Qianqiu as if he was hammering a nail. By the time he finished speaking, Rinpochen's ankles had sunk into the ground. "If I can slap you into the ground in the future, I will miss you even if I don't see you for a day," Rinpochen thought to himself as he pulled his feet out of the ground. What did it mean to not bully the young for being poor? This was exactly what he was doing. "Where's the Great Xia army?" Rinpochen asked. "About 60 kilometers southeast," Li Qianqiu immediately replied. "When do we attack?" Rinpochen asked again. Chapter 375. Your Majesty, a letter came in from outside the city. Hongwu knocked on the door of the Empress's room and strode in. "What's written?" The Empress lay on the bed lazily and didn't like to move. It could be said that the pain in her body made her not want to move. "It says that if we let that army leave, we will release the siege of Tiesua Pass and Shun City and evacuate immediately." Hongwu placed that piece of paper on the Empress's bed. "Ha!" The Empress sneered. It was ridiculous that Great Xia still wanted to bring that army back at this time. Even if there were more casualties, they had to keep this army in Deyo. One had to know that this army was stained with the blood of the civilians. Even if there were more casualties, they had to bury this army in Deyo and suppress it. "Then I won't reply to them. How's your Majesty's health?" "Not bad," the Empress said faintly. Even though it felt like there were countless steel needles pricking her body, she only said faintly, "Not bad." She had been alone in the palace for a long time and had already formed her current temperament. Regardless of whether it was good or bad, bitter or happy, she wouldn't tell anyone. Therefore, when she was angry, she was like a volcano erupting and overflowing with murderous intent. Usually she was ice cold. It was only recently that she became more human. Occasionally, she would smile faintly like an ordinary person, think about her own troubles or throw a little tantrum. "Your Majesty, don't hide it from me. How would I not know the consequences of this method? Your Majesty was too rash this time. You must not do this again." Hongwu couldn't help but start nagging. "Get out," the Empress said coldly. "Your Majesty, you must take care of yourself," Hongwu advised as he retreated. After Hongwu left, the Empress crumpled the letter into a ball and threw it on the ground. Then, she lay there and listened to the occasional news from the radio station. "Inform the vanguard to stop and set up camp." A middle-aged general in the advancing Great Xia army gave the order. This person is called Yu Zheng, Great Xia's Shenwei general. He is one of the commanders of the two armies that entered Deyo. At this time, the sun had just set and there were 4 hours before the sky turned dark. However, there were 2 Deyo armies patrolling around, so they had to be careful at all times. After setting up camp, the middle-aged general gathered the other generals into his tent. "How was today?" "The Deyo army behind us is still following us. They're neither getting closer nor pulling away. I reckon that they're aware that they don't have enough manpower and are waiting to join up with the others before attacking," a bearded general said in a deep voice. "We also found traces of Deyo's mounted scouts 15 kilometers to the west. It should be the winged cavalry," another commander said. "Now that Wu Xingho is dead, the barbarians of Liao City will be able to free up their hands. After the two parties join forces, there will be 6,000 to 7,000 people. Together with the winged cavalry, it will indeed be a little troublesome," another general said. Zheng Zhong Tianshan, The two of you will each take 10,000 men and set up an ambush outside the main camp tonight. The rest of you will wear helmets and armor tonight and remain vigilant, the middle-aged general at the head of the table ordered. Sir, you mean? Make the same arrangements for the next few days. Don't let them attack at night. Yu Jing instructed. In another military camp, the same arrangement was made. Although the two armies had joined together, they were still commanded by their respective generals. Wearing night vision goggles, Renbaqian, Li Qianqiu, and the rest sneaked their way to a spot 1 kilometer away from Great Xia's campsite. Hey, they're waiting for us. Renbaqian looked at the camp with the night vision device and suddenly laughed. In the camp, all the tents near the fence were empty, and there was no thermal response at all. Even a fool would know that the other party was waiting for them. Go and find out where their ambush troops are. Renbaqian turned around and instructed Li Qianqiu. This kind of situation was often seen in movies and dramas. Usually the people in the camp would be prepared, and there would be troops lying in ambush outside. When they rushed in, they would be attacked head-on, and the ambush troops outside would block their way of retreat and launch a pincer attack. Li Qianqiu gave the order, and soon, a few winged cavalry warriors disappeared into the darkness. After more than an hour, a winged cavalry warrior came back and reported, "There are at least 10,000 soldiers in the north and northwest direction of the Great Xia camp." Not long after, another winged cavalry warrior came back and reported, "There are 2 armies in the east and southeast direction of the Great Xia camp." Renbaqian and Li Qianqiu calculated that there were at least 30 to 40,000 soldiers lying in ambush outside. Rather than attacking the camp, it was better to take down the ambush troops. After making up their minds, they didn't hesitate anymore. Together with the aboriginal army in the south, they kept an eye on those 2 armies and waited for them to make a move before attacking. Meanwhile, Renbaqian, Li Qianqiu, and the winged cavalry warriors were close to the ambush troops in the northeast. Renbaqian adjusted the mortar and didn't fire. Instead, he let the winged cavalry warriors sneak over first. Those Great Xia soldiers were still waiting to ambush them, and it was time to see who would be the one ambushing who. In a small forest that wasn't considered dense, tens of thousands of Great Xia soldiers were quietly lying in ambush, waiting for a possible night attack. Captain, do you think there will be a show tonight? Only God knows if there will be any problems. Just wait obediently and don't talk. But there are too many mosquitoes in this damn place. Very soon the noises subsided again. Other than panting and the rustling sound of people moving their bodies, there were no other sounds. Many soldiers even started to doze off. A scream suddenly came from the edge of the forest. What's the matter? As soon as the captain asked this question, he heard thousands of people shouting from the edge of the forest, "Great Xia dogs, kill!" It's the Dayo soldiers. The people lying in ambush in the forest didn't have the time to think about why they were ambushed by someone else. They shouted one after another, waking up the soldiers who were dozing off. It's the winged cavalry. A scream came from afar, and the people in the forest who didn't know what was happening, immediately understood. Light the torches. The captain shouted. Fighting the winged cavalry in the dark was simply courting death. They could only light the torches, form a formation, and wait for the main camp and the other ambush troops to come to their rescue. Very soon, Renbaqian saw the torches in the forest not far away. The light from the torches illuminated the forest red, and he could clearly see everything inside and outside. The ambush troops in the forest also clearly saw the approaching people and the gleaming cold swords that followed the figures. The weather is dry. Be careful of the candles. Renbaqian muttered softly. He took the cannonball and stuffed it into the barrel. He turned to the side and said, "Hold it." 2 guards immediately reached out to hold the barrel. Renbaqian then released his hands and covered his ears. Bang! 2 consecutive sounds rang out. The Great Xia soldiers in the forest, who were hurriedly forming a formation, suddenly exploded into 2 balls of fire. Shrapnel flew everywhere and directly blew up a group of people. The already chaotic Great Xia army became even more chaotic after encountering such a situation. Renbaqian picked his ears, took the other 2 cannonballs, put them into the barrel and covered his ears. Another 2 balls of fire burst out in the forest. The Great Xia army in the north has moved and is rushing toward the forest. A mounted scout reported from the walkie-talkie. Set off. Li Qianqiu ordered his subordinates through the walkie-talkie. 3,000 soldiers immediately rushed toward the route of the ambush troops in the north. These 3,000 soldiers collided with the Great Xia army, and a loud "kill" immediately erupted. At this moment, the main camp of Great Xia was also in chaos. They had been waiting for the Dayo soldiers to attack at night, but they didn't expect them to be the two ambush troops outside. The camp hurriedly mobilized troops to rescue them. The north camp of Great Xia has moved. 3,000 to 4,000 people have come out and they are all practitioners. A message came from the walkie-talkie. Quickly set up my great spear. Ren Baqin shouted. He didn't forget to turn to Li Qianqiu and say, for the happiness of Her Majesty. He then changed his tone to one of extreme pity and said, you must protect me. Li Qianqiu was speechless. Chapter 376. Damn it. Ren Baqin cursed and looked at the opposite side with the night vision goggles. In the past, Ren Baqin rarely scolded people at work, but now he was more and more nagging. He didn't need to care about his image and he would say whatever was on his mind. There were 3,000 to 4,000 martial artists. How many could he kill with a big gun? They weren't fools. Their legs were like car wheels and he would be lucky if he could kill a few hundred of them after using up all his bullets. Looking through the night vision goggles, he saw a yellow and red heat source moving rapidly in his direction. Da-da-da. The machine gun on the ground spat out a tongue of fire, and a long metal dragon directly opened up a hole in the crowd. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. Ren Baqin held the trigger and moved the muzzle to the left and right. The bullets scattered at a small angle. The red dots in the night vision goggles immediately fell. Some of the stronger martial artists used their weapons to block the bullets, and some of the weaker martial artists were directly shot in half. After a round of bullets, the opposing team suddenly stopped. The ferocious firepower gave them a fright. The opponent's hidden weapons are powerful. Disperse, a voice shouted in the crowd. Everyone dispersed like sheep. Some people jumped a few meters high and then glided to the distance. Some people lowered their feet and disappeared into the crowd in the blink of an eye. Some people moved like monkeys. After a few somersaults, they landed on the periphery of the crowd and then ran into the distance. Some people lay on the ground like lizards. They weren't slower than running but slightly faster. Ren Baqin could see clearly with the night vision goggles. He pressed on the bullets and swept toward the place with the most number of people. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. The gunfire paused for more than 10 seconds before it rang out again. After shooting 4 ammunition belts, Ren Baqin saw that the guards beside him were still loading bullets into the ammunition belts. The speed at which they fired was much faster than the speed at which they were loading bullets. He adjusted the angle of the mortar and fired it toward the place where the crowd was denser. There were too many people. Even after they dispersed, there were still many places where the crowd was more concentrated. Boom. Boom. 2 explosions and shrapnel blasted dozens of people to the ground. Ren Baqin fired 7 or 8 shots in a row, and the other party started to figure out the ropes. Be careful of the top of your head, don't take it head on. The other party will fall from the sky after the count of 23. Damn it, what a talent. Ren Baqin immediately cursed when he heard this from afar. After he finished cursing, he fired 2 shots in the direction of the voice. In the distance, a group of people looked up at the sky as they ran. Some people felt that there were more people nearby and immediately ran further away. It's above us. Run. As the sound rang out, not only were the targets of the artillery shells affected, but the people in other areas were also affected and scattered. Boom. The sky was so dark that it was already very late by the time they discovered the shells. There were still some who could not run out of the explosion range, but the casualties were indeed a lot less. 2 shots at most killed 10 people. 2 miles, a distance of 1,000 meters, was shortened to 300 meters in just a minute. Thousands of people shouted to kill the barbarian dogs as they rushed in Ren Baqin's direction. Now, they were not going to rescue the Great Xia soldiers in the small forest. Their minds were filled with the thought of killing the guy who fired the hidden weapons. At least 300 to 400 people were killed or maimed just now, and these people's eyes were bloodshot. Surly. Ren Baqin turned his head to look at Li Qianqiu pitifully. In the end, he saw Li Qianqiu's tent towering like a road sign. Ren Baqin was speechless. This is a war. Why are you so excited? Are you a masochist? I used to think that you were loyal, honest, and reliable. I didn't expect this, I really didn't expect this. At this moment, Ren Baqin's image of Li Qianqiu fell from the clouds to the ground, and he was immediately labeled as a perverted masochist. Sir. A shout came from not far away. Hundreds of winged cavalry warriors came out of the forest and surrounded Ren Baqin and the others. There was still a portion of the Great Xia soldiers who were still inside the forest. About 500 winged cavalry warriors came out of the forest and were prepared to intercept these Great Xia practitioners. It had only been 7 or 8 minutes since the surprise attack, and only the end of the battle was left in the forest. Under the circumstances where the other party didn't have an integrated military formation and didn't have an absolute advantage in numbers, they were like lambs in front of the winged cavalry, whose weakest members were at the earthwheel level. Seeing these winged cavalry warriors, Rinpoche finally felt a little relieved. Now, even if he took off the night vision goggles, he could already see the figures of those great Xia practitioners. Each and every one of them was like a wild dog that had broken free from its leash and was holding a variety of weapons in their hands. Every one of them had bloodshot eyes. It was conceivable that their minds were filled with thoughts of tearing the people here apart. A few seconds later, the winged cavalry clashed with those great Xia practitioners. Blades flashed, and the sounds of killing, screams, and weapons colliding immediately rang out in the surroundings. It's Earthwheel. They're all Earthwheel experts. It's the winged cavalry. The great Xia practitioners cried out in alarm, and what greeted them was the silent and ferocious killing of the winged cavalry. However, there were also many powerful great Xia practitioners, and there were at least 200 to 300 Earthwheel experts among them. Although they weren't a match for the winged cavalry in a one-on-one fight, they were able to hold them back with the help of others. Some of the more skillful practitioners jumped into the circle from the air. It was obvious that the people inside were the important ones. To catch the bandits, one must first catch the ringleader. More than one person thought this way. Rinpoche spat. Do you think this thing is used to shoot at the ground? This thing is an anti-aircraft machine gun. Rinpoche was determined. He raised the muzzle and fired at a figure in the air. Da-da-da. Clang clang clang. Sparks flew in all directions in the air. That figure kept twisting its body in the air, and the pair of daggers in its hands glittered with countless sparks. Awesome. As Rinpoche aimed the machine gun at that figure and sprayed bullets, a thought immediately flashed through his mind. The other party's weapon was definitely not ordinary. Otherwise, it definitely wouldn't be able to withstand so many bullets from the anti-aircraft machine gun. In the past, there were also people who felt that Rinpoche's dagger was very fast, but in the end, the dagger would break and the person would die. Rinpoche had already fired half a belt of bullets, but the other party had not only dodged the bullets, but also withstood dozens of bullets. Rinpoche felt that he might have encountered a treasure, and he would definitely snatch the dagger from that person later. He watched as that person brandished the dagger and collided with the bullets, getting further and further away from Rinpoche and higher from the ground. Rinpoche felt that if he had an unlimited supply of bullets, he could shoot that person to the moon. Clang. That person finally couldn't block the dagger. One of his legs was broken by the bullet, and he fell from the sky with a blood-curdling scream. Rinpoche fired a few more shots as if he was shooting a flying saucer. Blood splattered in the air, and that person fell to the ground in pieces. Rinpoche memorized the place where that person fell and waited to pick up the dagger after the battle. Li Qianqiu picked up his huge axe, jumped up, and hacked at another warrior who was approaching. When the other party saw the axe, which was as big as a door plank, slashed at him 7 times with the sword in his hand. Each slash hit the side of the axe, and a huge force was transmitted from the axe to Li Qianqiu's hand. Li Qianqiu acted as if he didn't feel anything. The trajectory of the huge axe didn't change at all, and it directly split that person in half from head to toe. He then threw the axe horizontally, drawing a straight line in the air and cutting the chest of another warrior who was pouncing toward Rinpoche in half. It was as if there was a rain of blood in the sky, splattering Rinpoche's face. Rinpoche reloaded the belt of bullets and continued to operate the machine gun. His eyes were bloodshot and he was going to shoot whoever jumped higher. The sounds of fighting and screams, the flying heads and severed arms, and the cries of lost loved ones and close friends all affected him. His whole body trembled with excitement, and his killing intent surged. Chapter 377. The martial artists of Great Xia were defeated faster than they had imagined. Before this, Rinpoche hadn't seen the aboriginals and Great Xia fight openly. They had always been defending the city or attacking at night. However, according to some rumors, the casualties of Great Xia's elite troops were usually 30 to 50%. This ratio was already considered a strong army. Even though these practitioners wouldn't obey orders, Rinpoche had always felt that they were more courageous and had a huge numerical advantage. In addition, they usually lived on the edge of a knife, so they would only collapse when the casualty rate was at least 30%. However, Rinpoche ignored the psychological pressure these practitioners felt when they faced the silent winged cavalry warriors. There had always been rumors that the aboriginals could defeat ordinary practitioners of the same level. In particular, they could see their own people falling one by one with blood spurting out from their bodies. On the other hand, the other side had very few casualties. Other than some famous Earthwheel experts who could contend with or even defeat them, most people were barely holding on and completely using their lives to fill the gap. Under such circumstances, many people had the intention to retreat when they found out who their opponents were. If their opponents were ordinary Aboriginal soldiers, they could still see some hope. However, they couldn't see any hope of victory when facing these winged cavalry warriors. In addition, they weren't the elites of the army who obeyed military orders. Even the death of Lu Pinghai could cause an uproar among the practitioners in the north, let alone when they were faced with hundreds of Earthwheel experts and were surrounded by death. Some of the quick-witted ones had already started to flee. This kind of behavior also spurred the others on. Furthermore, many of them weren't fleeing toward the Great Xia barracks but toward the northwest. As long as they could escape back to Great Xia, it would be better to conceal their identities than to lose their lives here. When the casualty rate was about 20%, the Great Xia practitioners began to disperse and flee in all directions. This 20% casualty rate was due to the winged cavalry killing too quickly. Most of the casualties were the weaker practitioners. Many of the winged cavalry kicked the ground and flew into the distance like cannonballs. If one didn't consider dodging techniques, Great Xia practitioners who were below the Earthwheel level were definitely no match for the winged cavalry when they ran in a straight line. However, Great Xia practitioners who were at the same level were far superior to the winged cavalry. Chase them for 500 meters and return. Li Qianqiu's voice rang out. Ren Baqian aimed the anti-aircraft gun for a long time and finally gave up resentfully. Otherwise, the winged cavalry would suffer the most casualties tonight. The winged cavalry warriors gave chase for a short while before returning. Each of them sat on the ground and used the strips of cloth that were torn from the corpses to wipe their sabers. Not long after, the winged cavalry warriors came out from the forest. At the very least, within their range of perception, there were no other living beings apart from them. The Great Xia soldiers were completely annihilated, and only a few managed to escape. The winged cavalry was more familiar with the forest. One had to know that most of the winged cavalry were recruited from the 60,000 mountains. Has the Great Xia barracks not come out yet? Ren Baqian sat on the ground and asked through the walkie-talkie. Sir, they haven't come out yet. They've only strengthened their defenses. Oh, Ren Baqian replied and fell to the ground with his head raised. Great Xia's response was very normal. If they came out to rescue, it would probably cause even more casualties. Under the circumstances of night and limited visibility, the strength of the Great Xia army was at its lowest, while the strength of the Aboriginals wasn't affected. Even though they knew that there were only a few thousand ancient race soldiers outside, they still didn't dare to move recklessly. However, in Ren Baqian's mind, it was only a matter of time before he died. It would take at least a week to reach the border from here. There was no way they could make it out alive. Li Qianqiu wouldn't let them make it out alive either. The hands of this army were stained with the blood of the Aboriginals. Although Ren Baqian didn't see it with his own eyes, he heard that many villages that weren't notified in time were directly flattened. There were also a few cities that had been destroyed. Ren Baqian looked at the galaxy in the night sky, sighed, and turned to ask Li Qianqiu, "Do you think the Great Xia people will also want to seek revenge on us? Just kill all those who want revenge. Kill them until they don't even dare to think about it." Li Qianqiu grinned cruelly in the style of the Aboriginals. To Ren Baqian, Li Qianqiu was a pretty good person. However, to outsiders, all the Aboriginals were cruel and bloodthirsty. The enemy of another is my hero. Ren Baqian sighed and threw this matter aside. In the past, he felt that human life was very important. He always felt that he was a good person, helping an old lady cross the road, being friendly to others, and helping others whenever he could. Even though he hadn't done any of these things before, he still felt that he was a good person. Even so, he still felt that he was a good person. Only the heavens knew when it started, but in his heart, human life had become just a noun. When the 3,000 soldiers returned and everyone was preparing to sneak toward the two ambushing troops in the south, they received news that the two ambushing troops were actually preparing to return to their barracks. Great Xia was originally prepared to leave a few ambushing troops to attack Dayo from the front and back, but they didn't expect the ambushing troops to become dishes on the table. How could they still leave those two troops there? When the Aboriginal troops in the south realized that the other party was actually returning to their barracks, it was already too late. They could only watch as they returned to their barracks in the dark of the night. "We have fought tonight. Come again tomorrow night," Ren Baqian said as he yawned. In one night, They had destroyed 1/7 of Great Xia's troops and scattered those practitioners. Now that Great Xia had already set up their battle formation in their barracks, there was no need to continue. When it was almost daybreak, the two armies finally converged. The 3,500 soldiers originally belonged to the Protectorate of the Center. At this time, they didn't cause any waves when they returned to Li Qianqiu's command. Other than the necessary scouts and sentries, the rest fell asleep. There were no tents or anything like that at all. In the wilderness, the Aboriginals basically used the sky as their blanket and the ground as their bed. Given the physique of the Aboriginals, they didn't care about the damp and cold at night. Ren Baqin slept in his clothes for the night. The next day he woke up with a bruise on his forehead and an embarrassed look on his face. This bunch of damn mosquitoes. After killing livestock and barbecuing meat, everyone chased after the Great Xia army. The other party had just set up camp when Ren Baqin and the others arrived. They started a fire and barbecued meat dozens of kilometers away, waiting for the night attack. A few hours later, in the middle of the night, Ren Baqin and the others found their way to the outside of the Great Xia barracks. Sure enough, they are waiting for us, Ren Baqin said after checking with the night vision device. Although the Great Xia barracks weren't in a battle formation, the tents outside were all empty just like the day before. Inside the barracks, there were large areas of heat sources lying in ambush waiting for them. The other party was so densely packed and tens of thousands of people were standing there like fools. Ren Baqin felt that he would be letting them down if he didn't fire a few cannons. He immediately used mortars and fired 2 cannons at the densely packed area. Following the explosions, there was obviously some chaos in the barracks, but it was quickly suppressed. Boom. 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 After 7 or 8 cannons, the chaos in the Great Xia barracks could no longer be suppressed. They didn't even see the enemy, but every explosion sent people tumbling. Sir, what should we do? A few generals gathered in a corner of the Great Xia barracks. Let's kill our way out, someone suggested. Kill our way out? That group of barbarians is waiting outside. We saw smoke in the distance in the evening, and they might have gathered together. There are at least 6,000 to 7,000 of them. If we go out at night, I'm afraid we will die. Another general frowned. But staying here is also a dead end. If we continue to wait, our morale will be gone. We might as well go out and kill a few more barbarians. Another general said anxiously. The timely sound of the cannons was a footnote to his words. The group was caught in a dilemma. They couldn't go out now, but they couldn't stay either. If they went out, the Aboriginals would be waiting outside. If they fought in the dark, the outcome would be obvious. If they didn't go out, they would be passively beaten. Furthermore, they couldn't even see the enemy. The soldiers below had already started to get restless. After a while, they would be in chaos before the enemy came to fight. Aggrieved. Everyone had the same thought in their hearts. This battle was too aggrieving. They didn't know whether to advance or retreat. They had never fought such an aggrieved battle before. Wait. Finally, the person who was surrounded in the middle spoke. I don't believe that they won't run out of these weapons. Chapter 378. After the next few rounds, the enemy remained motionless except for the area near the explosion site. Ren Baqin hoped that the other party would make a move. After the other party moved, they would create a certain amount of chaos so that it would be easier for the army to break in. With such an explosion, it seemed like the enemy had no way to retaliate, but the number of artillery shells was limited. If Ren Baqin had 1,000 or 800 artillery shells, he would be able to bombard them until they doubted their lives. He was sure that when they returned to Great Xia they would ponder, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? The problem was that there was none. The other side did not move, and many of them squatted down to try and reduce the damage from the explosives. If he continued to bombard them for a while longer, they would probably fall to the ground. Then, they would immediately discover that the damage of the shells would be greatly reduced when they fell to the ground. Where are their rations? Ren Baqin turned his head and asked Li Qianqiu. Very quickly, dozens of winged cavalry warriors surrounded the enemy's camp to investigate. Very soon the news came back. The enemy's rations were also tightly surrounded. Where can I see it? Go and take a look. Ren Baqin said. No need to go through so much trouble. Li Qianqiu waved his hand. Carrying Ren Baqin with one hand, he exerted force with his legs and leaped 20 to 30 meters into the air. Ren Baqin took off his night vision goggles and could barely see the rations in the middle. The outer fence was filled with torches, but there wasn't much light inside. However, everyone had torches in their hands. As long as the Dayo army attacked, They would light up the torches and the camp would immediately be brightly lit. However, there were still some torches in the center which allowed him to see them clearly. In the middle of the mountainous pile of rations, the great Xia soldiers stood in a battle formation with their backs against the rations. Although they surrounded the rations due to the terrain and layout, the two gates had the most people while the north barracks had the least people. In the army there were two camps, one in the south and one in the north. This way they could help each other and not interfere with each other. Among them, the first army to enter Dayo was the current north barracks. Most of the practitioners were in the north barracks, but they were scattered in yesterday's battle. It was unknown how many of them returned to the barracks. Yesterday, more than half of the 20,000 soldiers in ambush had been lost, and only a few had managed to escape. Now there were no more than 40,000 people in the camp. The south camp that attacked tonight was made up of the 100,000 reinforcements that came later. There were still 80,000 of them left. When Rinpoche was at the highest point, he could see everything below him clearly. Then there was a ripping sound. For a moment, Rinpoche couldn't feel the hand that was grabbing his collar. His clothes couldn't bear the weight and were pulled apart. He was scared out of his wits. With his current strength, falling from a height of 20 to 30 meters, even if he didn't die from the fall, his legs would definitely be broken. Most importantly, when his clothes were torn, it would tear him. He couldn't control his body at all. Fortunately, Licentio reacted in an instant and grabbed his arm, pulling him down from the sky. Like a meteorite crashing into the ground, the entire ground shook. As soon as he landed, Rinpoche cursed, "Damn you! Wouldn't it have been fine if he had just grabbed her arm and jumped up from the beginning?" Just now, his heart rate had almost soared to 180. Licentio pulled his leg out from the ground and turned to look at him. He was silent at first before he asked, "Do you know him?" Rinpoche, while telling himself not to get angry at these bastards, he continued to sulk. After a long time, he finally calmed down and started calculating the position of the enemy's rations. The clothes on his body had turned into a pile of rags, which he randomly wrapped around his body. He was no better than a beggar. Compared to the aboriginals, a large portion of his skin was exposed. Countless mosquitoes looked at him as if they were looking at Tang Sung, but he didn't notice them at all. "Extinguish all the torches," Rinpoche said. Dozens of winged cavalry warriors drew their bows and arrows. After a round of shots, the torches at the fence of the barracks were immediately shot off and fell to the ground. The light also dimmed. As dozens of winged cavalry warriors wandered around the barracks, more and more places became dimmer. This is how they are inside. Rinpoche drew an oval on the ground and marked the position near the middle. This was the position of the rations. In front of the barracks was a thick formation. The formation near the river and the north barracks was slightly weaker. The north barracks was the weakest, but it was easy for them to be pincered. As such, the position near the river was the best place to attack. In a while, I will use artillery fire to ignite their rations, and they will definitely fall into chaos. You guys cut in from here and kill your way out from here. After making a turn, you will exit from here and circle back to this point to await further orders. With your attack, they will definitely be affected in putting out the fire. Due to this delay, the fire will become bigger, and they will have to get water if they want to put out the fire. The others will lie in ambush at the place where they get water and kill whoever comes. Next, it depends on their reaction. It is impossible for the other party to ignore the rations. The rations in the north barracks are definitely not enough to last until they return to Great Xia. In that case, it is very likely that they will send a portion of their troops to the water source, cover the area, and then push the rest of the army up. Therefore, the troops at the water source have to be careful. There isn't a need to intercept too many people in the early stages, and the rest will be outside the firing range on both sides. As for how to deal with it, it will depend on the arrangement of the other party's troops. If there are no accidents, we will take down one of them, Rinpoche said as he drew the map. He had never learned any of the 36 stratagems or the art of war. As for the plan, Rinpoche felt that no matter what, it was better to have a plan than not. In any case, the worst outcome would be a head-on confrontation. With their current strength and the fact that they could disrupt the other party's formation with their mortars, they wouldn't lose even if they fought head-on. They just needed to minimize the number of casualties. What they were relying on now was that the other party didn't dare to act rashly and was holed up in one place. They were well aware of the other party's every move. In addition, they had the walkie-talkies to direct communication and the mortars to attack from afar. Furthermore, the strong individual strength of the Aboriginal warriors could be better utilized in the chaos. On Earth, could 1,000 Aboriginal warriors attack 100,000 people? In this world it was possible. The strength of an ordinary soldier was only 200 to 300 kilograms, but the strength of the winged cavalry warriors was 2,000 to 3,000 kilograms. They could slash bullets. This kind of reaction speed, and tremendous strength allowed the winged cavalry, an aboriginal elite, to fight against 100 people. It was as if they were unparalleled. All of these factors added up to their advantage. A few of the key points were the walkie-talkies and night vision devices that were brought over from Earth. Even though they wouldn't cause direct damage, they played a huge role. The night vision devices allowed them to see the other party's every move in the dark. The walkie-talkies could directly contact the army and didn't require any messengers to go down. Whether it was mobilizing troops or issuing other orders, they could be reached in time. "What should we do if the northern barracks come to our rescue?" Li Qianxiu asked. "In that case, find something for them to do first," Ren replied. Everyone approached the vicinity of the north barracks, and Ren took another high-altitude tour. The rations of the north barracks were almost the same as those of the south barracks. "Send 500 men to the river bank of the north barracks and prepare to intercept them." Li Qianxiu used the walkie-talkie to make arrangements. Ren adjusted the angle and fired. 10 shells were fired in a row. Each time the angle was adjusted slightly. This round of artillery fire was just enough to cover half of the north barracks' rations. When each shell exploded, the sparks that sprayed out ignited the surrounding rations. The north barracks, which had been on high alert, immediately became chaotic. Immediately there were cries of "Water, put out the fire." The Great Xia army first overturned the rations cart to minimize their losses. Then they rushed to the nearby tents and used bedding to cover the rations. At the same time, they also sent some people to the river bank to fetch water. However, there were immediately shouts from the river bank. The 1,000 soldiers who went to fetch water were like meat buns that were beaten up. However, in a short period of time. Chapter 379. With a series of explosions, the south barracks quickly became chaotic. The soldiers could withstand the bombardment and continue to turtle up, but the rations couldn't. Without rations, Dayo didn't need to attack, and this army would starve to death along the way. This Great Xia army immediately responded in kind. The soldiers surrounding the perimeter also made their preparations. They all knew that the attack of the aboriginals was coming. The first thing they faced wasn't the charge of the winged cavalry, but another round of artillery shells from Ren. More than a dozen artillery shells were fired in succession, spreading from the densest position to the side. More than half of the artillery shells hit the position where the winged cavalry was preparing to attack. Then, close to the river, 1,000 winged cavalry warriors appeared from the darkness. With the flash of a blade, a section of the fence fell, and the winged cavalry formed a cone-shaped formation and charged toward the enemy. Like a knife cutting through butter, the Great Xia army, which had yet to recover from the chaos, was directly cut apart. First, the tip was inserted, and then the winged cavalry at the back widened the gap. Every time the front was blocked, a few people would jump out from the back and continue to use the tip of the blade to penetrate deeper. In just 5 minutes they had killed their way from the edge to the center. The winged cavalry on the periphery immediately spread out like a blooming flower, or rather, from a fist into a palm. The soldiers in the center of the Great Xia army fell in rows. At the same time, some people set fire everywhere, overturning the rations carts into burning positions, causing the fire to grow bigger and more rations to be destroyed. Li Qianxiu jumped up and down in the darkness to observe the movements of the Great Xia army. He saw that the 2-meter radius under his feet was half a meter lower than the rest. This caused Ren to turn his attention to him. Under Li Qianxiu's command, before the winged cavalry was completely surrounded by Great Xia, they killed their way out from the weakest point in the north. After kicking down the fence, they escaped from the small open space between the north barracks and the north barracks, quickly disappearing into the night. Previously, the Great Xia army in the south barracks could still reduce their losses by separating the rations and using quilts to extinguish the fire. However, the raging fire at this moment made them give up on this idea. At least half of the rations had been turned into flames. In the middle of the Great Xia army, the middle-aged general looked at the huge flame in front of him with an ashen face. The light from the flame formed a strange red color on his face. "Get water and put out the fire." He squeezed out 2 words with difficulty. "Sir, I'm afraid they are waiting outside." The disturbance in the north barracks was caused by their rations being burned, but of course, of those barbarians of theirs didn't attack them, someone immediately reported. Soldiers with swords and shields, get ready. Gunners, get ready. Archers, get ready of the crossbow battalion, the general of Great Xia ordered. With the transfer of military orders, a total of 20,000 people formed a military formation near the river. At the front were the saber and shield troops, behind them were the crossbow troops, and further back were 2 rows of pikemen. Behind them were 3 rows of archers. While they were moving, in the darkness outside the camp, 2 people were moving up and down, Rinpoche sighed as he descended from the sky. He was jumping up and down as if he was jumping on a spring bed. Die of they were to they of them of. Damn it, if you die in the future you'll definitely die of stupidity. Also, why are you erecting a tent? My lord, we've managed to snatch back half of the rations. We don't have enough time for the rest. Do we still need to fetch water? A general pointed at the huge bonfire in front of them. These things couldn't be saved even if they were watered. As the winged cavalry had done a great job of setting the fire when they charged in, Rinpoche wanted to lure them over to fetch water to put out the fire. In the end, they had given up on that idea. The commanding general of the South Camp had a murderous look on his face. Act as though we are going to draw water. Send some people out to probe. If the aboriginals are outside, fire immediately. Following his order, the army that had already been set up moved towards the riverside. They stopped when they were 200 feet away from the fence, and the archers shot 3 rounds of arrows outwards. Under Rinpoche's command, the aboriginal soldiers who were intercepting and killing outside lay prone on the other side of the fence. This position was just out of reach. The arrow pierced through the air and fell into the river. Following which, a few hundred Great Xia soldiers rushed out with buckets of water in their hands. Then blood-curdling screams could be heard. Release. The Great Xia soldiers in the camp fired 3 rounds of arrows without any hesitation. This time, the sound of arrows piercing human bodies could be heard. During the war between Dayo and Great Xia, the most casualties were caused by shooting from outside a certain range. If both sides engaged in hand-to-hand combat, there would be fewer casualties, but the casualties of the other side would rise sharply. Rinpoche and Lichencio watched from afar as Great Xia fired rounds of arrows and felt slightly puzzled. Something doesn't seem right. Just as he was feeling puzzled, the other party sent out a few hundred death squads to charge outside. When the sounds of fighting were heard, several rounds of arrows immediately rained down from inside the camp. Damn, they aren't trying to put out the fire at all. They are fishing. Rinpoche looked at the army that was standing motionless in place and immediately reacted. According to his original plan, if the other party wanted to put out the fire, they would definitely push the army to the riverside. At that time, they would be out of the range of the camp and further away from the Great Xia soldiers in the middle of the camp. Then, his own army would kill their way over and swallow these 20,000 soldiers. One had to know that a camp with 80,000 soldiers had to have a radius of at least 5 kilometers. For example, this south camp was 4 kilometers wide and 7 to 8 kilometers wide. From the center of the camp to the gate facing the river, it was only 1 kilometer away. However, the rear end of this army was only 1 kilometer away from the center of the camp, and the other Great Xia soldiers would only need a few minutes to provide support. The other party stood there motionlessly and wouldn't move forward even if they were beaten to death. Instead, they sent out a few hundred soldiers twice in a row. When the sounds of fighting were heard, they immediately covered the area and fired without even caring about their own people. Damn, this is different from what I thought, Rinpoche cursed. At present, the distance between this army and the other Great Xia soldiers in the middle of the camp was much shorter than what Rinpoche had expected. If they were to rush over now, it would be impossible for them to retreat before the other party arrived to provide support. At that time, it would become a head-on confrontation, which went against his initial plan of minimizing casualties. However, the other party wasn't a marionette. How could they possibly act according to his plan? Should we go or not? Lichencio asked. According to his plan, they would directly charge over now and kill the other party's reinforcements when they arrived. There was nothing to be afraid of. 6,000 strong soldiers and 1,000 winged cavalry warriors could be said to have a sufficient chance of winning against 80,000 Great Xia soldiers. The only problem was that the losses would be greater. Go if the conditions are right, then go. If not, then force yourself on them. Rinpoche spat and continued, the rest of you get ready to retreat. The winged cavalry, get into position. I will first bombard them with artillery fire. The winged cavalry will charge in and kill 2 rounds before withdrawing. After Rinpoche expressed his determination, he still felt that there was no need to fight recklessly. There were still 7 days left and the journey was long. If he conserved his troops, he would still have to go to the Yin nation to snatch weapons. However, it was all thanks to the Empress's winged cavalry warriors. With this elite force, whether it was facing the charge of 100,000 soldiers, ending the battle quickly, harassing them at night, or long-distance raids, there was nothing that they couldn't do. Chapter 380. Boom. A series of explosions rang out in Great Xia's campsite. Kill. As the winged cavalry got closer, dozens of people in front of them brandished their swords and kicked them. The fences made of tree trunks, which were 10 centimeters in diameter, immediately collapsed. One by one, the winged cavalry emerged from the night sky. Their bodies were much stronger than ordinary people, and their murderous aura sent chills down people's spines. Kill. The winged cavalry formed a conical formation and pounced on the chaotic battle formation that had just been swept by the artillery shells. Crossbow battalions shoot. Archers shoot at the rear. Soldiers with swords and shields stop them. 6th, 7th, and 8th teams spearmen go to the front. A series of orders came from the battle formation, and waves of crossbow arrows were shot at the incoming winged cavalry. Great Xia's battle formation was in an arc shape. Even if the winged cavalry charged in from the side, they would still be covered by a considerable number of crossbow arrows. However, the battle formation that had just been swept by the artillery shells was already in chaos, and the crossbow arrows didn't pose much of a threat. The winged cavalry charged into the crowd and set off a rain of blood. Using mortars to open a path and disrupt the opponent's battle formation, the winged cavalry would charge directly into the enemy's battle formation and engage in hand-to-hand combat. Using the powerful individual strength of the winged cavalry to mess up the enemy's battle formation was a tried and tested method. Li Qianqiu continued to carry Rinpochen up and down. The night wind blew in his face and Rinpochen wanted to sing, "The cold night wind is carelessly slapping on my face." However, his gaze was soon fixed on something. At this moment he could already see that the enemy's battle formation had been completely torn apart. The corpses on the ground and the blood flowing freely on the ground looked like a dark red flower from afar. The rest of the enemy had already begun to flee in all directions. Most of them ran toward the center of the campsite, and the enemy's battle formation in the center of the campsite also moved in this direction. Just as the fleeing soldiers were about to reach the battle formation, the reinforcements stopped 200 steps away. Then, a rain of arrows covered the sky and covered the moon as they rained down in front of them. At the same time, the sounds of arrows being drawn overlapped and formed a loud buzzing sound. Regardless of whether it was the winged cavalry or their own army, they were all within shooting range. So ruthless. Rinpochen muttered to himself. One had to know that nearly half of the 20,000 soldiers were still alive. These were the living Great Xia soldiers, their own people. This was not a small number but nearly 10,000 people. How was he going to explain to the other soldiers that the enemy's commander was so ruthless? How was he going to explain to the imperial court of the Great Xia dynasty when he returned? After noticing the rain of arrows, the winged cavalry warriors picked up the corpses from the ground one after another and raised them above their heads to shield themselves from the arrows. There were also some who brandished their swords so that not even a drop of water could penetrate them. "Let's retreat," Rinpochen said. His goal had been achieved. Today's battle results were good enough. Again, there were still 7 days left. The days were long. Following Li Qianqiu's orders, Rinpochen and the others began to withdraw and return to the predetermined rendezvous point. The winged cavalry took a detour and came back faster than Rinpochen and the others. When Rinpochen returned, he saw them sitting there and bandaging their wounds in silence. Rinpochen counted from the beginning to the end. There were 976 people, which was a little less. Even though the strength of an earthwheel expert was overwhelmingly superior to ordinary soldiers, and the winged cavalry warriors were like superhumans in terms of strength, stamina, speed, reaction speed, and resistance to attacks. However, there would still be casualties on the battlefield every time. Most of the casualties were caused by crossbow bolts. Even after charging into the enemy's formation, crossbow bolts would be shot from the dark. After all, the crossbow battalion wasn't a bunch of fools who would be slaughtered at close range. In particular, the winged cavalry warriors generally had a bad habit of jumping forward to slash people after killing everyone around them. There were so many people, yet you still jumped so high. Who else would you shoot if not you? After circling around the camp, Rinpochen bade farewell to Li Qianqiu and led the guards to a remote place. He instructed the guards to stand guard nearby before disappearing into the night. By now, many people had their own guesses. Since the beginning of Rinpoche's journey to Liao City, even though Rinpoche had tried his best to find a separate room and disappear, there would be a bunch of things around him every few days. As a result, Rinpoche was already prepared to be guessed. In any case, he had mentioned the Hearthstone to Tong Jingye before. However, no one asked him and he allowed them to speculate in secret. However, the idea of traveling between worlds was still too distant for the Aboriginals. In their hearts, Rinpoche's country was still somewhere in this world. When Rinpoche returned to Earth, he still had 2 short knives with him. The knives were about 70 centimeters long, 40 centimeters long, and 3 fingers wide. The hilt and scabbard were made of gold and silver respectively. One of the knives was engraved with the words Golden Time, and the other with Silver Time. The knives belonged to the guy who was almost sent to the moon by Rinpoche that day. His corpse was scattered, but the knives were still intact. When Rinpoche received them, he tested them and found that they could indeed cut through iron like mud. The other sword that was picked up by the soldiers was broken after 3 slashes. After obtaining these knives, Rinpoche felt like he had found a treasure. Unfortunately, he was too weak and couldn't use them. He hugged them to sleep for a night before throwing them aside. This time he specially brought them back. The Aboriginals didn't use these knives and he didn't know how to use them. Therefore he brought them back to show off. Occasionally he had to bring back some good stuff to prevent them from looking down on that world. When he returned to the villa, he first threw the knives aside, prepared a pool of hot water and took a good bath. He then strolled to the room next door that was full of snacks, took a few bags of dried fruits, beef jerky and drinks and ran to the first floor to watch TV. After fighting for more than a month, it was now mid-April in Dayo and March 2019 on Earth. Although he would watch the news every time he came back, he felt that his sense of alienation from Earth was getting heavier. The main reason was that his mind was filled with bombs, artillery shells and grenades every time he came back. Other than Yang Sen and his family, he had very little contact with other people. The ordinary life on Earth seemed to have little to do with him. In addition, time was not synchronized. The timeline on Earth was moving too fast, and the result was that this sense of alienation became more and more obvious. Rinpoche sighed with emotion. He felt that as time passed, this sense of alienation might still appear between him and his family. As time passed, this situation would become more serious. However, this was something that couldn't be helped. If he lived to be 100 years old, he would at least live until 2170 on Earth. At that time, not to mention his son, even his great-grandson would die. After staying on the sofa for a day, Rinpoche picked up his phone to return missed calls. One of them was from his mother. His father was going to celebrate his 52nd birthday and wanted him to bring his girlfriend home. Last year, his mother was already upset that he didn't bring his girlfriend back for her 50th birthday. She had been thinking about the person in the photo for a long time. The result of her thinking was his father's 52nd birthday, and it seemed that she would continue to celebrate his mother's 51st birthday this year. Other than the two of them, no one else would celebrate their birthday. The other call was from Chin Chin. The hangover medicine, Blue Bottle, was already on the market. In a very short period of time, it immediately became popular. Its powerful effects immediately crushed all the similar products in the market, and its reputation spread abroad. Although there were some doubtful comments about Blue Bottle on the internet, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that it was created by a competitor. Now, Blue Bottle didn't lack fame or sales. What it lacked was production. At present, Papa Chin was loftily marking up land in the south to plant green vines. Another piece of news was that a special medicine to treat leukemia had been developed and was about to undergo clinical trials. At present, the nation was very concerned about this medicine. After hearing this news, although Rinpoche smiled and responded, he didn't feel much. As mentioned before, he hadn't come into contact with the lives of ordinary people on Earth for a long time. Money, which was very important to him in the past, didn't have much meaning to him anymore. He didn't even have many opportunities to spend money, and it was really just a number. Rinpoche thought about it and suddenly felt that he was quite pitiful. Other people still had a few friends or enemies, and they still had someone to act cool to when they had nothing to do. But what about himself? Other than dealing with the nation, he didn't even have someone to act cool to. Chapter 381. When Rinpoche came out of the laboratory, he looked slightly disappointed. Initially, he thought that this was the only way he could show off. However, after the people in the laboratory witnessed the miraculous effects of the longevity saber, even though the pair of daggers were sharp, they did not surprise the people in the laboratory too much. Seeing their reactions, Rinpoche felt that he was flirting with them. He didn't want to stay any longer. After bidding farewell to Yang Sen, he drove away. A moment later, Rinpoche was sitting in a delicately decorated restaurant with a bottle of beer and 2 side dishes to kill time. In fact, he was craving hot pot. Although he could return to Earth from time to time these days, there was not much meaning in staying alone. Especially since he was the only one in such a big villa, it was too cold and cheerless. Fortunately, it was going to end soon. As long as they annihilated this great Xia army, this war would be considered over. As for the Protectorate of the Northeast and the Yun Nation, he felt that providing them with a batch of grenades was enough. Although the 400,000 soldiers of the Yun Nation's army sounded very intimidating, in reality, only the 180,000 soldiers of the Western Garrison Army had real combat power. The troops of the other cities were all in their own groups. It was already good enough if they didn't drag the Yun Nation's army down. They were the type of people who would strive to be the first in a favorable battle and would strive to be the first to run faster than others once they encountered a setback. His biggest use was probably to shout 666 from the side. When the time came to fetch the Empress, he would have to return to Earth and have a good rest. It was really tough for him to spend the past few days in the wilderness. Rinpoche raised his wine glass and thought about it. Even though he hadn't done much besides setting off the cannon at the rear, he had still worked hard. First, he toasted himself and then he thought about his cultivation. He hadn't trained for a long time, and his strength had been stuck at around 680 pounds for a long time. He had no choice. He had no money and no medicinal herbs. The Empress's palace treasury had already gone bankrupt. Fortunately, even though the 2 shopkeepers were robbed, they managed to bring back 7,000 taels of gold. According to the ratio, it was equivalent to 70,000 taels of silver. When they returned to Lan City to purchase medicinal herbs, it would be enough for them to practice for a period of time. After that, there was that whatever city lord of the Yun Nation. After killing him, he would snatch his family's wealth. Presumably, it would be enough for him to use for some time. It was said that His Majesty had placed the monitoring division in charge of this matter. The name of the monitoring division sounded a bit like the East or West faction in ancient times, but in fact, it was responsible for everything. For example, arrest, assassination, and so on. It was not an exaggeration to say that the monitoring division was a dog raised by the royal family. There weren't many of them. It was said that there were only about 100 of them, and they were all at least at the earthwheel level. Unlike the winged cavalry who were adept at charging and breaking through enemy lines, they were more adept at small-scale killings. It was said that the 7th prince of the Xia kingdom was killed by the supervisory department. The thoughts in his head spun a few times. He had already drunk half a bottle of wine, but the dishes hadn't been touched much. Rinpoche put aside his thoughts and focused on his meal. Coincidentally, he turned his head and saw a lady walking out of the washroom and sitting at a table not far away. His eyes immediately widened and he was stunned. The chopsticks in his hand were immediately broken into 2 by him. F***ck. Rinpoche's heart was in turmoil. Similar, really too similar. Previously in that world, the 7th prince looked exactly like Rinpoche. Previously in Prague, Rinpoche met a worker from a country. The Empress said that he looked like Hua Sanlu and that she hated him. He had always wondered if there were people in this world who looked the same as those in the other world. For example, the Empress. After all, even people on Earth often looked exactly the same. There had been such news on the internet. It wasn't impossible for someone to look like the Empress on Earth. However, Earth was so big and there were more than 1 billion people. Even if there was someone who looked like the Empress, only God knew where that person was and how old that person was. Rinpoche might not even meet that person in his lifetime. From the fact that Hua Sanlu was about 60 years old and the person he met in Prague was only about 30 years old, he knew that even if there were people who looked the same in both worlds, they wouldn't be the same age. After all, even the flow of time was different. Therefore, he felt that he might not meet someone who looked like the Empress in his lifetime. However, he didn't expect that he would actually meet someone who looked like the Empress. This was like buying something on Taobao and getting a lottery ticket from the seller. In the end, he even hit the jackpot. Unbelievable. She was wearing a white t-shirt, jeans, and a thin white coat. Her hair was just past her ears, and her face was slightly rounder than the Empress's. Her expression and temperament were different as well. Compared to the Empress, she was much more immature and not as cold. Most importantly, she didn't have the imposing manner of the Empress who controlled life and death for many years. She also didn't have the confidence of one of the top experts in the world. Her eyebrows were also thinner than the Empress's. She was less heroic and more elegant. Even though they weren't exactly the same, they were at least 80% similar in appearance. Even though she didn't have the temperament of the Empress, she still looked very exquisite. The other party seemed to have sensed his gaze. When she sat down, she tilted her head and glanced at Rinpochen. When she saw Rinpochen's expression, it was as if he had seen a ghost. She frowned and turned her face away. What the F***ck? What the F***ck? Rinpochen didn't know what else to say. What should I do? Countless thoughts spun in Rinpochen's head. What should he do with a woman who looked 80% similar to the Empress? Ignore her? Impossible. Rinpochen could accept the existence of a person who looked exactly like the Empress in this world. However, if this person were to marry someone else and have children in the future, he would absolutely not be able to accept it. It felt as if there was a Huluan beer prairie above his head. Just thinking about it made him feel extremely uncomfortable. This woman didn't look very old. Coupled with the way she was dressed, she should be in her 3rd year of high school, 1st year, and 2nd year of university. That kind of prairie would grow up sooner or later. Why don't I kill her? This thought immediately emerged in Rinpochen's mind. A murderous intent arose in his heart. As long as I kill her, I won't have to think about such things anymore. Even though she was very innocent, even though she didn't do anything and didn't know anything, she was too similar to the Empress. For such a woman to marry another man and have children, he couldn't accept it no matter what. The more Rinpochen thought about it, the more intense the murderous intent in his heart became. Rinpochen's gaze was always on that woman. The murderous intent in his heart gushed out. It was like a steel needle piercing into that woman's body, making her feel uncomfortable all over. She kept feeling that her body was somewhat uncomfortable. That woman finally found the source of her discomfort. It was the gaze of the person behind her. However, it was difficult for her to distinguish whether this gaze was murderous or something else. After all, as a beauty, she had seen all kinds of gazes. Chapter 382. Should I kill or not? Should I kill or not? Rinpochen kept his head down and looked at that table from the corner of his eye. On one hand, he told himself that there were so many twins in the world. Their appearance, family background, and even their figures were almost the same. He didn't see anyone who minded. No matter how similar they weren't the same person. Furthermore, they weren't exactly the same. On the other hand, he couldn't get out of this circle when he thought of a girl with such a face falling into someone else's embrace in the future. He drew a circle and trapped himself in it. No matter what thoughts he had, he couldn't get out of this circle. To put it simply, he was stuck in a dead end and wouldn't come out even if he was beaten to death. If he was given some time, he might just laugh and throw this matter aside. Unfortunately, he didn't have the opportunity now. He was still immersed in his own thoughts and was in a dilemma. Should I kill or not? If this was Dayo or if this girl didn't look like the Empress, he might have already made up his mind. However, if that was the case, there was no need for him to make up his mind. Rinpochen didn't know how long he pondered. His gaze fell on a table that paid the bill and stood up to leave. He came to his senses, threw the money on the table, and hurriedly followed them out. There were 3 girls standing by the roadside trying to hail a taxi. The girl who looked like the Empress turned her head and saw Rinpochen following them out. She whispered a few words to her 2 companions. Her 2 companions turned to look at him and then turned their heads away. Rinpochen stood beside the car and watched the 3 girls leave in a taxi before following them. He followed them all the way to a campus. Rinpochen paid attention to the name of the school, SH University. Just as he thought, they were still students. Rinpochen left his car outside and strolled into the campus from a distance. Up until now, he still hadn't made up his mind. After all, it wasn't easy to kill a girl who looked like the Empress and didn't know anything. Walking in an unfamiliar campus surrounded by young students, Rinpochen's murderous heart finally calmed down. It was filled with a peaceful and youthful atmosphere that was completely different from the war-torn world. He finally remembered that he had promised the nation not to stir up trouble. It wasn't worth it to crack the cooperation between him and the nation because of this matter. Furthermore, he had yet to bring the Empress to his newly bought villa that came with a swimming pool and a supermarket. For the sake of this villa, for the sake of the bikini, he could not be too reckless. He decided to find an opportunity to talk to that woman and find a different solution. At most, he would find an opportunity to kidnap her back to Dayo in a few days. Before that, he had to know who that girl was. There were tens of thousands of people in such a big school. If he didn't know who she was, it would be difficult to find her in the future. At the thought of this, Rinpoche quickened his pace. However, when he was about 20 meters away from the women in front of him, a few people appeared in front of him and stopped the three women. The man in the middle, who was wearing a shirt, was holding a flower in his hand. Rinpoche immediately realized that there was no chance for him to be a hero and save the damsel in distress. Once again, there was no chance for him to be a hero and save the damsel in distress. After all, this was 211 University. It was impossible for anything to happen on campus. The flowers in the boy's hands made Rinpoche feel that a melodramatic plot was about to unfold. Chi Jiaju, be my girlfriend. The boy holding the flowers suddenly said loudly. So her name is Chi Jiaju. She actually has the same surname as the Empress. Rinpoche thought about it and felt that the situation was too melodramatic. Nowadays, even the television didn't do it this way. It was not creative at all. However, that boy was still slightly handsome, just not as handsome as Rinpoche. Chi Jiaju's two female companions immediately took a step to the side, making her stand out. Now, it was the boy who was courting her and the others were watching. The boy's companions were still shouting, "Say yes." Such a situation made the students who were passing by stop to watch. After all, it was rare to see such a plot in a third-rate television series. Rinpoche cursed in his heart, "Mother asterisk cur." He felt that if he were to go over now, it would immediately turn into a third-rate melodramatic romance. However, he couldn't just stand here and watch, right? Rinpoche felt that he still needed to disturb them. "Sorry, we are not very suitable. I think I should find a better one." Chi Jiaju's sudden words almost made Rinpoche trip. He was immediately shocked by this girl. It was difficult for him to say such words, but she actually said it in front of so many people. However, at this time, Rinpoche was already 2 meters behind Chi Jiaju. It seemed that it was too late to turn around and leave now. In particular, the sound of his footsteps attracted the attention of one of Chi Jiaju's female companions. She turned her head and looked at him in surprise. "What should I do? I have already dealt with the other party and I am striding over. What should I do next? I already know the girl's name. Should I turn around and leave now?" Rinpoche was embarrassed. However, how could Rinpoche turn around and leave under such circumstances? Rinpoche had never done such a cowardly thing before. Rinpoche gritted his teeth and strode over to the boy. The boy had just accepted being rejected and didn't know whether to be angry or not. Then he saw a man striding over to him and staring at him. Is this her boyfriend? Or is he the same as me? The boy immediately thought. You. The boy had just said one word when Rinpoche slapped him to the ground. The boy, who was originally quite handsome, suffered this slap and half of his face swelled up. This sudden turn of events shocked everyone, and then it was followed by anger. After all, this was an ivory tower and this was a group of students who were still in the ivory tower. However, Rinpoche's next sentence made everyone forget about their anger and turn into shock and bewilderment. "You actually want her to abandon me? Are you still a man?" Rinpoche angrily pointed at Chi Jiaju, who was behind him, and then pointed at himself. As soon as he said this, everyone was immediately petrified. What kind of operation was this? *CK, this was too bizarre. What a series of twists and turns. This was much more exciting than a melodramatic drama. Even the boy's companions were shocked and took a few steps back. Chi Jiaju, who was behind Rinpoche, was initially stunned when she saw Rinpoche's back and clothes. Then she thought of something and was still thinking about the word stalker, when she was stunned by Rinpoche's words. Her mouth was slightly open, and she had a lifeless look on her face. The boy who was slapped on the ground was dumbfounded. He pointed at Rinpoche and said, You. He looked as if he had been wronged, was anxious, and didn't know how to explain himself. He pointed at Rinpoche and couldn't think of anything else to say other than you. The corner of his mouth was still bleeding. Rinpoche's slap had knocked out a tooth. Whores are heartless and actors are heartless. I mistook you for someone else. Rinpoche gave him another kick in the stomach, making him swallow his words. He cursed, turned around and walked away. The already stunned crowd was even more shocked at this moment. Chapter 383. Rinpoche didn't care that he had cast a shadow on that kid and caused him to spend the last 2.5 years of his university life alone. When he returned to the villa, Rinpoche was in a daze. He had already asked Shen Feng to investigate the girl called Chi Jiaju. How could she deal with this kind of thing? There shouldn't be any problem. Rinpoche then began to contemplate. This afternoon he seemed to be possessed by a demon. All he could think about was killing her. It was very strange. Before this incident, this was the first time he had such a strong urge to kill someone, and that was the seventh prince. That kind of killing intent was extremely strong. One had to know that he had never even killed a chicken before. But this time it was different from the seventh prince. The seventh prince was exactly the same as him. When he saw him, he felt like they were mortal enemies. If he didn't die, then he would. If he wasn't wrong, the seventh prince had the same thought as him. According to him, he was in another world. There should be some connection between the two of them that he didn't know about. Therefore, when he saw the other party, he wanted to kill the other party. But this person looked like the Empress. Even if he wanted to kill, it should be the Empress. Why did he have such a strong killing intent? And that thought at that time was simply inexplicable. It was as if someone had stuffed that thought into his head. Then his mind was filled with killing intent and he didn't care about anything else. He only calmed down when he reached the campus. It was very strange. What exactly was going on? Even if he had such thoughts, he would tell the Empress about it and see her reaction instead of her reaction at that time. What had affected him? Could it be the metal chain? That thing was in his soul. If there was anything that could affect him, it could only be the metal chain. That shouldn't be the case. After so many times of contact with the metal chain during his cultivation, he could vaguely sense that the metal chain was like a blank piece of paper. Or rather, it was an infant that didn't understand anything and acted according to its instincts. How could such a thing affect him? Yang Sen looked at the report in his hand with a strange expression. That piece of paper described what happened at SH University this afternoon. No matter who saw the content, they would be a little confused. That Ren Baqian actually went to SH University to snatch someone's boyfriend? This news was really too explosive. Any results? Yang Sen raised his head and asked. There was a gay-looking middle-aged man standing in front of him. If someone said that this man went to steal a boyfriend, he might really believe it. His target isn't that man, the middle-aged man said as he raised his head. His voice was slow and carried a strange accent. His target is the woman called Qi Jieyu, the middle-aged man said. Yang Sen looked at him without saying a word. He knew this news even without him saying it. What she wanted to know was why he did it. Take a look at this information first. The middle-aged man took out a document and placed it in front of him. Yang Sen first took a look at the photo on the document and was slightly stunned. Doesn't he look familiar? The middle-aged man smiled and pinched his orchid fingers. His smile was very charming. Yang Sen did not know why the word charming popped up in his heart. Then he felt a chill run down his spine. Then he said with a straight face, "They do look alike. No wonder he went to SH University." You definitely won't be able to guess why he followed you to SH University. The middle-aged man laughed again. Won't be able to guess? Yang Sen laughed. How could he not be able to guess? It wasn't only him. Even an ordinary person would be very concerned if they saw someone who looked almost identical to their girlfriend or wife. Take a look at these. The middle-aged man took out a stack of printed photos from the document. This is the surveillance video of their restaurant. He was lucky that one of the cameras happened to be pointing diagonally in his direction. Otherwise, I'm afraid this important piece of information would have been missed. Yang Sen picked up the photos and flipped through them. Very soon, his expression became serious and he began to frown. It was obvious that he was pondering. What does his expression mean? Yang Sen looked up and asked after seeing the last photo. It was obvious that there was something wrong with his expression and gaze at that time. Even he could see it. Needless to say, this expert opposite him could. Murderous intent. He wants to kill that girl. The middle-aged man gestured a pistol with his hand and pointed it at Yang Senior. Bang. What? Yang Sen really couldn't understand this time. There's no reason to love someone and there's no reason to hate someone either. Humans are just so strange. However, the situation this time is a little different. This girl looks the same as that person from the paradise, but he wants to kill her. There must be a reason for this. What do you mean? There are many possibilities. For example, love me, love my dog, and hate me, love my dog. The strength of both parties isn't equal. That person is only at the peak of human strength, but that girl has far exceeded the limits of human strength. Although she hasn't reached the level of the legendary immortals, she isn't someone that humans can reach. What are the chances of this? Yang Sen looked serious. This problem was too serious and had a huge impact. Might be very small. After all, I have seen the video of the two of them. If they can hide it from me, then Earth owes them an Oscar. Furthermore, based on their characters, there's no need for them to deliberately make such a gesture. Yang Sen really wanted to knock the ashtray on the man's head. In fact, only the person involved knows about this. I'm just raising a possibility. Perhaps it's to kill his wife to prove himself? Their martial arts are definitely different from the ones you have, and they're much more advanced. Perhaps there are all sorts of strange requests such as killing his wife to prove himself. Since he can't kill his own wife, he must find someone similar to his wife to kill. Perhaps he didn't have this idea at first, but when he saw that girl he had this idea. Therefore, it's not surprising that he revealed such a murderous intent. Yang Sen had a thoughtful look on his face. This wasn't impossible. Ren Baqin didn't know that some people had already misunderstood him. If he knew what Yang Sen and the others were thinking, he would spit blood at them. He had just received Qi Jiyu's information before returning to Deyo, and it was personally delivered by Shin Feng. He wasn't in a hurry to look at it. Instead, he placed it in his desk. He still felt that his initial reaction was very strange. As such, he wanted to put this matter aside to avoid any problems before returning. He would think about it after returning from Deyo. A moment later, he returned to Deyo with 80 mortar shells and 400 hand grenades. When he appeared at the place where he disappeared, he called out softly. Immediately, a few guards appeared around him. "Sir, bring the things and catch up with them overnight," Rinpoche said faintly. When they saw the 2 piles of boxes beside Rinpoche, they didn't find it strange at all. After tying the boxes to the 4-corned cow, Rinpoche also tied himself to it and started to doze off. Last night he kept thinking about that problem and couldn't fall asleep after a few hours of sleep. After returning today, he immediately felt sleepy and couldn't even open his eyes. Compared to Earth, he felt more at ease in Deyo. There were still countries on Earth and a bunch of people studying him in some corner. Chapter 384. They traveled through the night and only caught up with Li Qianqiu and the others the next night. Rinpoche got off the 4-corned cow, laid his head on the ground and didn't move at all. How many more days before they can leave Deyo? Rinpoche asked. Based on the current speed, about 5 days, Li Qianqiu replied. If we harass them every night and don't let them sleep, how many days can they last? Rinpoche suddenly asked. He felt extremely tired, but at least he could sleep on the back of the 4-corned cow. If they were Great Xia soldiers who couldn't sleep at night and had to march during the day, they would probably collapse in a few days. 3 days at most. However, the commander of Great Xia will soon notice and formulate countermeasures, Li Qianqiu said. So what if they notice? If they let some of them rest, we will feign an attack. I don't believe that those who rest can continue to sleep. If they really ignore us, we will attack and see what they can do. Rinpoche struggled to keep his eyes open. In any case, the Aboriginals marched much faster than the Great Xia soldiers. The Aboriginals could rest for half a day before giving chase, but they couldn't possibly rest for half a day before setting up camp. If they dared to stop for a day, the reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South would be only a day away. Even if they marched normally every day, they would be able to catch up in 3 days at most. The Great Xia soldiers were tired these few days and they would probably collapse at that time. We can try. Li Qianqiu nodded. Although it was different from his usual way of using troops, it didn't sound bad. Li Qianqiu and the others left with 200 grenades and didn't return until dawn. Just as Rinpoche had discussed before, they didn't directly attack but harassed the Aboriginals from outside the camp so that they couldn't relax for even a moment. However, Great Xia's encampment today was a little different from before. The 2 opposing armies were grouped together when setting up camp. It seemed like the number of soldiers in each army was too small and didn't dare to set up camp separately. After one night, the Great Xia soldiers were tired and were about to set up camp again. When the Aboriginals started to rest, Rinpoche, who had slept for a night, was actually full of energy. He strolled around the camp before running to one side and continuing to stare blankly. At noon, when everyone got up to light a fire to cook, Rinpoche went to Li Qianqiu and greeted, "Sir Li." "Sir Ren, what's the matter?" Li Qianqiu asked. "Do you know of anything that can affect a person's thinking and make them come up with ideas that they wouldn't normally have?" Rinpoche asked. "A lot." Li Qianqiu exclaimed. "A lot? Lord Li, tell me about it." Rinpoche immediately perked up. He had been pondering over this matter for a few days, but he still couldn't figure it out. This old man knows of a type of mushroom. After eating it, one will hallucinate and see that others are shorter than him, as if he has become a giant. Furthermore, his ego was extremely inflated. He even dared to provoke people or beasts that he normally didn't dare to provoke. Li Qianqiu reminisced about the time when he accidentally ate the mushroom and caused a commotion. As a result, he was bedridden for half a month. What a deep memory. When Rinpoche saw his expression, he immediately felt that there was a story behind Surly. However, this was not the kind of thing he wanted to know. It's not like this. Rinpoche thought for a while and told her about what he had encountered previously. It was as if someone had instilled an idea into his mind. Oh, did someone plot against you, Lord Rin? Li Qianxiu asked. Why do you say so? Rinpoche asked. As far as I know, there is a slut called Xia Wanyang in Great Xia. Her heaven-grade weapon can provoke the 7 emotions and 6 desires of people and slightly influence the thoughts of others. However, this is only hearsay and I don't know the details, Li Qianxiu said in a deep voice. Rinpoche remained silent after hearing this. He knew that this was impossible. The people of Great Xia couldn't possibly go to Earth to plot against him, right? Forget it. Perhaps he had been stained with too much murderous intent on the battlefield these days and was momentarily possessed. He would know when he returned to Earth and met that girl called Qi Jieyu. At the thought of this, Rinpoche put this matter aside for now. That evening they arrived near the Great Xia encampment. Before the sky turned dark, Rinpoche fired a few cannons from 2 kilometers away. Then, the winged cavalry rushed to about 300 meters away from the Great Xia encampment. Seeing that it was a boiling cauldron of people and that everyone had been mobilized, the winged cavalry turned around and left. After a while, when they had just relaxed, the winged cavalry continued to harass them. Since they wanted to harass them and drag them out, they couldn't let them rest at all. They didn't sleep much last night and had to march for an entire day. At this moment, the Great Xia soldiers couldn't take it anymore. When the winged cavalry rushed over, everyone was nervous and could still stay awake. However, not long after the winged cavalry left, many people dozed off while standing. In the Great Xia encampment, a few generals came forward to report, "General, I'm afraid the soldiers won't be able to take it if this goes on." A middle-aged general stroked his beard and said in a deep voice, "These barbarians actually know how to play tricks? They want to use the tactic of exhausting the soldiers and not let us rest. Pass down the order to let 1/3 of the soldiers go back and rest. No matter what happens, they are not to come out and replace the others after 4 hours." The movements in the Great Xia encampment couldn't be hidden. Very soon, Li Qianxiu and Rinpoche found out that 2/3 of the soldiers in the Great Xia encampment were on guard while 1/3 of the soldiers went back to rest. "Do we still continue?" Li Qianxiu asked. "Continue," Rinpoche answered without hesitation. As long as they maintained a certain intensity to oppress the other party, he didn't believe that they could rest well. If the harassment didn't work, they would faint. If the feint didn't work, they would attack for real. In any case, they had to drag them down. For the rest of the night, battle cries could be heard from time to time in the Great Xia encampment, accompanied by explosions. Sometimes, the winged cavalry would be more than 300 meters away from the other party's firing range before turning around and leaving. After one night, all the Great Xia soldiers were so tired that they wanted to lie down on the spot. Even though they knew that the winged cavalry were fainting, no one dared to be careless. Every time the winged cavalry attacked, they had to maintain a tense state of mind. It wasn't easy for them to rest for 4 hours, but they were still awakened from time to time. In this way, they didn't recover their strength at all, and they had to break camp and set off again the next morning. For the rest of the night, the winged cavalry first feinted a round of attacks. Even though the other party was still cautious, it was inevitable that they would relax a little. Many of them were so tired that they couldn't take it anymore. They thought that they might be harassed the next time and that they should rest first to comfort themselves and gradually relax. In the end, the feint attack turned into an actual attack. First, the mortars opened up a path and bombed the front row of the other party. The Great Xia soldiers had experienced such things countless times. However, after that, the winged cavalry didn't turn around at more than 300 meters away. Instead, they sped up and broke through the distance of 300 meters in half a minute. They directly pounced into the crowd, and the sounds of killing resounded throughout the Great Xia encampment again. After killing for a while, the winged cavalry took advantage of the fact that the other party hadn't completely surrounded them and quickly left. That night, everyone in the Great Xia encampment didn't dare to relax at all. In order to prevent the aboriginals from turning their feint attack into an actual attack, they even set up 2 groups of 10,000 soldiers in the encampment. However, what happened next was that the winged cavalry directly rushed into one of the groups of soldiers and killed them, leaving behind a pile of corpses. No matter how they set up the ambush, the other party seemed to be able to see it. Even the generals of Great Xia were suspecting whether there were spies from the other party in their own army. The sky brightened up again, and the great Xia soldiers in the encampment finally heaved a sigh of relief. According to the usual practice, the aboriginals wouldn't attack during the day. However, when they thought about the upcoming march, everyone's face was full of pain. Even though Great Xia was right in front of them and they would be able to leave Dayo in 2.5 days, everyone couldn't hold on any longer. Many people stood there swaying and struggling to keep their eyelids open. The face of the Great Xia general was ashen. Even though he had already let the soldiers in the camp take turns to rest, a march of 70 to 80 kilometers during the day wasn't enough for them to rest for less than 4 hours at night. In just 3 days, many people couldn't hold on any longer. The other party's tactic of exhausting the soldiers was extremely simple and crude. It was almost as if they were clearly telling the general, "I'm not letting you rest and I'm going to drag you to death." The general had tried his best to make arrangements, but the result was still the same. It was obvious that the other party attacked every night while he defended every day. The other party could hold on, but he couldn't. Sometimes he even envied the Aboriginal generals for having such powerful soldiers. If he had an army of 1,000 earthwheel experts, even if the weakest soldier under him was at the manwheel level, this war wouldn't have ended up like this. In terms of strategy and military strategy, the other party was like a child in his eyes. However, the other party's childlike strategy and military strategy, coupled with an army that advanced and retreated like the wind and had strong individual strength, put him in a difficult position. The other party could win the war even with their eyes closed. He couldn't fight them and he couldn't trap them either. The other party could come and go as they pleased. In the past, when he fought with the Protectorate of the North, it was still better. Even though his side suffered more casualties, the other party's casualties were still relatively high compared to Dayo's military strength. However, ever since the other party had those strange weapons that could break through the battle formation, he couldn't even exchange casualties with the other party. Not to mention, he didn't know how the other party was doing their reconnaissance. It seemed like nothing in his camp could hide from those barbarians. Now, even if he hid an ambush, no matter how well he hid it, it would be immediately discovered and devoured. This had been proven time and time again. For a general who was originally full of lofty aspirations and led his army into the enemy's country, the current situation was extremely tragic. After standing there for a long time, he informed the general of the other army and ordered, "We won't set off today. Keep 2/3 of the soldiers on guard and 1/3 of the soldiers resting. Rotate every 4 hours." If this dragged on, the soldiers would become even more tired and the situation would worsen. Since this was the case, it was better to rest for a day and prepare for the next attack of the Aboriginals. Otherwise, they would collapse before the enemy could attack. When the order was passed down, the barracks were filled with cheers. However, there was no smile on his face. In fact, he knew that even though there were still 2.5 days to go, not many of his soldiers could leave Great Xia's territory. At present, there were less than 90,000 soldiers, but the other party had 1,000 winged cavalry warriors and 6,000 soldiers from the Protectorate of the Center. Even if they fought face to face, it would be difficult for him to win. Not to mention the weapons that the other party had that could disrupt the battle formation. Chapter 385. Sir, the Great Xia soldiers haven't broken camp yet. It seems like they won't be leaving today. A scout reported from the walkie-talkie. "Continue to pay attention," Li Qianqiu said simply. Ren Baqian heard this and laughed. "It seems like the Great Xia soldiers have chosen their burial ground. Although it's a little desolate, the scenery isn't bad." "In that case, let's fulfill their wish," Li Qianqiu said in a deep voice. "According to the route of the reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South, they should be able to meet at noon. This reinforcements had a radio station that could be contacted at any time, and it would be easy to meet up. Together with these 5,000 soldiers, it was enough to bury the Great Xia soldiers here. There were still 2.5 days before they could leave Dayo, and the Great Xia soldiers wouldn't be able to escape even if they scattered." Ren Baqian got up from the ground and stretched himself. He looked at the Aboriginal soldiers who were lying down and sleeping on the ground in front of him and thought that this sudden war was finally coming to an end. In 1.5 months, more than 500,000 people had died. The war in this world was simple, primitive, and cruel. Next, it was time to pick up the Empress, a rainbow cloud. Fortunately, it wasn't a rainbow cloud that could fly. Otherwise, he would be at a loss. Li Qianqiu stayed by the radio station the entire morning to know the movements of the reinforcements. Before noon, the reinforcements encountered the scouts sent by Li Qianqiu. Just after noon, they saw a few goat-riding riders coming from afar. "Sir, they have arrived." "Good," Li Qianqiu said in a deep voice. He didn't move, but a moment later, a dense mass of troops appeared in his field of vision. Above the troops were a few flags with the words, Imperial South. These were the reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South. 5,000 valiant soldiers carrying bundles on their backs, wearing leather armor that only covered the left side of their bodies, and wielding long sabers stopped 500 meters away. Following which, a few generals dismounted from their fork-horned cows and went straight to Li Qianqiu's position. "Are you Sir Li?" "Greetings, Sir Li. The 5,000 soldiers have arrived." A few of them stepped forward and saw Li Qianqiu produce a token. After which, they cupped their fists and handed a token to Li Qianqiu. "Thank you for your hard work along the way." Li Qianqiu nodded as he stuffed the token into his waist pocket. "Everyone seems to be tired. Let the soldiers rest first. Light a fire and eat. In the afternoon, recharge and build up energy. At night we will attack. In the evening, all of you will come and receive orders. After this battle, this old man will invite everyone to a banquet." "Yes." The generals obeyed. Originally, Rinpoche thought that there would be a lot of things to hand over after the two of them met up. He didn't expect that they would only hand over a token and only say a few words before it was over. It was straightforward and efficient. After the few of them returned, Li Qianqiu said, "The one in front is Hongzi, the son of the general-in-chief who supports the nation. He didn't disgrace his father's reputation." Only then did Rinpoche know that Hong Wu's son was actually among the reinforcements. Hong Wu's son, Hong Xian's father. He had some impression of him. Back then, Du Changkong had mentioned that Hong Xian's grandfather was Hong Wu and her father was a military officer in the Protectorate of the South. However, ever since the Great Hunt, Rinpoche hadn't had any dealings with people with the surname Hong, so he didn't pay much attention to it. However, after thinking about it carefully, he really didn't have any impression of the few people he saw just now. Even though he wasn't face-blind, the most prominent characteristics of the Aboriginals were their well-developed muscles and broad bodies. As for their appearances, most of them had fierce faces, so it was really difficult to distinguish them. The reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South rested for the entire afternoon. When it was almost evening, Li Qianqiu called for a few generals to make arrangements. In fact, there weren't many arrangements. This time they were going to attack by force, break up Great Xia and then pursue them. First, Rinpoche used the mortars to disrupt the enemy's formation. Then the winged cavalry charged in like a blade, followed by Li Qianqiu's men. On the other hand, the Protectorate of the South took a detour and launched a pincer attack from another direction. The winged cavalry and Li Qianqiu's troops attacked from the southwest, while the Protectorate of the South attacked from the southeast, driving the Great Xia army to the north. 12,000 soldiers against less than 90,000 soldiers. There was no need to consider anything else and they just had to attack by force. After defeating the enemy, the winged cavalry continued to pursue them at the front. As long as the defeated Great Xia soldiers tried to form a small group, the winged cavalry would break them up and defeat them. This would make it easier for the soldiers at the back to pursue and attack. Li Qianqiu took out a few walkie-talkies and handed them to the generals from the Protectorate of the South. It was more convenient to use these things on the battlefield. After making some simple arrangements, everyone went back to make preparations. After dinner, everyone who had just rested for the entire afternoon got up and used the whetstones they brought along to sharpen their swords. The winged cavalry and Li Qianqiu's troops all had pained expressions on their faces. These days they had participated in more battles, and the blades of their swords were full of big and small nicks like saw blades. Putting aside the hatred between their nation and their families, these swords were their lifeblood. Seeing their lifeblood in such a state made them hate Great Xia to the core. Everyone waited until it was past midnight before they got up and set off. According to the schedule, they would attack at the intersection of the Hour of the Ox and the Hour of the Ox. If they attacked at this time, it would be dawn in 2 hours and it would be easier to pursue them. "They have discovered us," the mounted scout said through the walkie-talkie. Rinpoche rolled his eyes. Wasn't this nonsense? Li Qianqiu's troops were almost at the entrance of Great Xia's barracks. Rinpoche could see their sentries with his naked eyes, and they should have discovered them even if they were blind. Rinpoche got down from the fork-horned cow and asked Li Qianqiu to bring him to a high place to see the position of the Great Xia army. After he came down, he began to adjust the muzzle of his cannon. However, when he was high up in the sky, he realized that the enemy's formation had changed. Instead of everyone standing together like before, they were divided into the center, left and right flanks. Instead, they were divided into nearly 20 small formations. They are also thinking of countermeasures. If such a small formation were to be bombarded, it would obviously be easier for them to regroup than before. Rinpoche asked Li Qianxiu to bring him up into the sky 3 times. After coming down, he drew the positions of the 20 small formations on the ground, calculated in his mind, and wrote down the numbers on the ground. After that, everyone began to wait in silence. At this moment, the inside and outside of the barracks were filled with a somber atmosphere. Inside was the Great Xia army, and outside was the Aboriginal army. It seemed like they were on the verge of breaking out. This kind of atmosphere was extremely depressing. It was as if a heavy stone was pressing on one's heart, making one want to shout and vent. Ah! Rinpoche shouted. Everyone turned to look at him. Don't bother about me. My throat is just itchy and I want to shout. Rinpoche waved his hand. How much longer? Another 15 minutes. Call me in another 15 minutes, Rinpoche replied. After a while, one of the guards said, Sir, it's time. Get to work. Rinpoche opened the lid of the box at the side and revealed the cannonballs below. Hold them. Rinpoche gestured. As per usual, 2 guards immediately came forward to hold the cannonballs. Boom, boom. 2 cannonballs directly exploded in the middle of the Great Xia army. Following which, all the Great Xia soldiers did the same action and squatted down with their hands on their heads. More than 80,000 people squatted down with their hands on their heads at the same time. The scene was extremely spectacular. In the next 7 minutes, Rinpoche fired a total of 40 cannonballs, which was close to 6 per minute. According to his memory, each of the 10 small formations was rewarded with 4 cannonballs. In such a short period of time, he wouldn't be able to adjust any more. Furthermore, some of the formations in the middle had already reorganized their formation by the time the winged cavalry arrived. Kill? Li Qianxiu didn't even look at the results of Rinpoche's battle. When the time was up, he let out a long roar. The 1,000 winged cavalry warriors immediately went from static to dynamic after the order was given. It only took them 11 to 12 seconds to cross a distance of 200 meters and rush into the Great Xia barracks at an even faster speed. Kill? All sorts of shouts could be heard from the Great Xia barracks. When Li Qianxiu and his men also rushed in, Rinpoche sat on the ground. There was nothing else for him to do after this, and this war had basically come to an end. Rinpoche took out a piece of white rabbit creamy candy from his pocket and threw it into his mouth. He lay on the ground and looked at the stars for a long time. Suddenly, he remembered that this bag of white rabbit creamy candy had been with him for a long time and hadn't been used up. If Lin Xiaola was here, he probably wouldn't be able to last more than a few days. Lin Xiaola? Rinpoche first thought of the sleeping goddess. Then he suddenly realized that where was his big bodyguard? When the Empress was in Liao City, Lin Xiaola found a place to sleep. However, after the Empress left, he also forgot about her. She left Liao City just like that. Chapter 386. After the reinforcements from the Protectorate of the South attacked from the southeast, it didn't take long for the Great Xia army to collapse. The sounds of battle began to move north from the camp. Let's go. Rinpoche stood up and patted his buttocks. This was already the last battle. What followed next would be endless pursuit and killing. It had nothing to do with him anymore. Inform Surly that we will leave first and wait for them in Liao City. Rinpoche instructed a guard to inform Surly. In a while he would make a trip back to Earth. After which, he would head to Liao City and wait for the winged cavalry to arrive before heading to Tiesua Pass to fetch the Empress. A moment later he suddenly thought of something and walked into the Great Xia barracks. At this moment, the Great Xia army was already fleeing towards the north, and there weren't many people left in the barracks. Only the ground was littered with severed corpses. The Aboriginals were too strong, especially the winged cavalry warriors. Most of the time their blades would be cut in half. As a result, the ground was littered with severed limbs and internal organs. It was a disgusting sight. Can you tell if a person was an expert just by looking at the corpse? Rinpoche asked the bodyguard. I can't tell. The guards were dumbfounded. Telling whether a person was an expert from a corpse was the same as asking them if they could tell whether an animal was male or female when it was alive. Rinpoche was a little disappointed. With so many corpses, it wasn't easy to find a few experts. My lord, this subordinate might be able to give it a try, a guard suddenly said. Find me the corpses of 2 experts, and I'll give you half a kilogram of white rabbit creamy candies when you're done. The guard scratched his head. What the hell was a big white rabbit? Then he chuckled, "Let's talk about it after I find it. But you have to change the reward." Following that, everyone watched as he rummaged through the crowd. He didn't rummage through them one by one. Instead, he would look down from time to time as he walked through the crowd before shaking his head and leaving. Clearly he had a clear goal in mind. After half an hour he came back dragging 2 armored corpses. "My lord, this person's strength should not be low." Rinpoche looked at that person's attire and suddenly realized that he had forgotten about this matter. The generals of this world, even if they were not top-notch experts, would not be too weak. "My lord, this person seems to be a commandant, and from the injuries on his body, it seems that he wasn't killed in one blow." Looking at the position of the blade and the blunt tip, it was obvious that this was a weapon used by the winged cavalry. The winged cavalry was too strong, and they didn't need a sharp blade to kill someone. Furthermore, a sharp blade would break easily. Therefore, the winged cavalry used a rounder blade. Furthermore, he didn't kill the winged cavalry warrior in one blow. Instead, he had 4 wounds on his body. This shows that he had exchanged blows with the winged cavalry warrior several times. He is at least an intermediate earthwheel expert or even an advanced earthwheel expert. After listening to his analysis, Rinpoche was immediately shocked. There was actually such a smart guard among his group of guards? What a genius. He remembered this person's name. His name was Jianghu. Although he was an earthwheel expert, these guards were all earthwheel experts. Usually he didn't see anything outstanding about them. "Well done," Rinpoche praised. Jianghu chuckled. "What reward do you want?" "My lord, you have collected a lot of weapons these days. Among them there is a saber that I covet. Since you don't use a saber, I would like to ask for it." Jianghu immediately answered. He had been eyeing that saber for some time, but hadn't had a suitable opportunity. It just so happened that Rinpoche wanted to find the corpse of an expert from a pile of tens of thousands of corpses today. He immediately knew that the opportunity had come. "Meritorious service will be rewarded. You can pick one yourself later." Rinpoche nodded. Those weapons were left behind by the great Xiao practitioners a few days ago. Rinpoche picked some that looked good and kept them. Since Jianghu wanted them, it didn't matter if they were given to him. "Thank you, my lord." Jianghu immediately expressed his gratitude with a happy look on his face. The other guards were also envious. A good saber was more important to them than any treasure and even more important than a wife. "The same goes for all of you. Work hard and you will naturally be rewarded," Rinpoche added. "Thank you, my lord." Everyone thanked him in unison. Even though it was more dangerous to follow Rinpoche, it was mainly because he was always being assassinated. He was still weak and had to rely on his guards to protect him. However, Rinpoche wasn't a stingy person. He had a lot of tricks up his sleeves and had a close relationship with the Empress. Everyone naturally believed what he said. "Search again and find the corpse of another expert," Rinpoche said to Jianghu. After that, Rinpoche waited there while a few of the guards went into the pile of corpses to help search. After a long time they finally found a second corpse. Looking at the armor on the body, it was also a captain. Rinpoche was satisfied with finding 2 corpses. "Stuff the internal organs back in and block them up." Rinpoche pointed at the 2 corpses that had their internal organs trailing along. It was best to bring the internal organs back as well. Who knew if there was any difference in the internal organs of an earthwheel expert and an ordinary person? Rinpoche brought everyone to a remote place and got someone to put the bundle of sabers and swords on the forkhorn cows back on the ground. "See which one you want." Jianghu was ecstatic. She immediately took out a saber and held it with both hands. "My lord, this is the one." Rinpoche held it in his hands. It was very heavy and weighed at least 50 to 60 kilograms. The scabbard was a greenish copper scabbard, and the handle was wrapped in animal skin. After pulling the saber out of the scabbard, Rinpoche immediately knew why it was so heavy. The thickest part was as thick as 2 fingers, and the widest part near the scabbard was as wide as a palm. The back of the saber was a straight line, and the blade drew an arc from the widest part all the way to the tip. The body of the saber was 1 meter long and looked somewhat like an enlarged boning knife. Clang. Rinpoche sheathed the saber and threw it to the expectant Jianghu. "It's yours." "Thank you, my lord." Jianghu hugged the saber happily as if she was hugging her wife. After that, Rinpoche tied up the 2 corpses, got everyone to leave and brought the corpses back to Earth. These corpses were prepared for the research institute. Although the progress of martial arts on Earth wasn't low, those who practiced martial arts were already close to the man-wheel level. After obtaining the martial arts, their progress was naturally very fast. In the future their progress would probably slow down. Rinpoche couldn't wait. He was still waiting for Earth to research something that he wanted. It wasn't just the Earth wheel, but the most important thing was the spirit wheel. It was a smooth path for him to advance to the Earth wheel level, but the method to advance to the spirit wheel level was vague in Rui visualization. He didn't want to be dumbfounded when he reached the peak of the Earth wheel level. In any case, the research on Earth would be of great benefit to him. After returning to Earth, he first threw the 2 corpses into the bathroom, found a large bag and put the corpses in the trunk. During this process, he had the illusion that he was dismembering the corpses. In Deo, there was nothing wrong with carrying these corpses around. However, on Earth, the feeling of putting the corpses in the trunk was extremely strong. The main reason was that the environment was different. On Earth, this scene was too familiar as it was shown in the movies. Rinpoche reckoned that he would be stopped by the police on the way to the research institute, which would be perfect. Next, it would be an action movie or the rule of law. Chapter 387. Check. The policeman outside the car knocked on the window. Rinpoche searched his body. He still had his identification from a certain department. In the end, after searching all over, he didn't even have his wallet. Nowadays, people use their mobile phones to pay for lollipops when they go out. Who would still bring their wallet or ID? Wait, let me make a call. Rinpoche said as he lowered the window. No matter who you call, you have to check first. The police officer didn't give him a good look. He hated people who called for small matters like this. If he didn't do this, he wouldn't be able to show his identity. The country's secret department. Some of the things in the car are classified. Rinpoche said with a straight face. He had really raised a flag. Whatever you want comes to you. There weren't many police officers going in and out of the car, but there were 2 corpses in the trunk. He did not want to go to the police station. The policeman heard his words and curled his lips. Secret department. How could there be so many secret departments? Please show me your identification. I didn't bring it. Rinpoche answered honestly. Rinpoche ignored him and called Yang Senator. When Yang Sen picked up the phone, Rinpoche finally heaved a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that Yang Sen did not bring his cell phone with him or was temporarily unable to answer the call. If that was the case, Rinpoche would be in big trouble. I was stopped by the police on the road for an inspection. There are some confidential items in my car. Get someone to pick them up. Rinpoche said straightforwardly and gave the address. After making the call, Rinpoche spread his hands at the policeman, leaned back in his seat and waited for him to come over. Remove the key, the policeman said. He only relaxed a little after Rinpoche removed the key from the car. Rinpoche's behavior made him believe that there was definitely something shameful in the car. On the other hand, Rinpoche had nothing to fear. Furthermore, he did mention that it was confidential information when he made the call. This made him hesitate for a moment whether he should force the other party to come down. After all, no one would believe that he was from a secret department without any identification. At this moment, a police officer came over with a dog. The dog immediately barked at Rinpoche's carriage. Let him come down and open it. The police officer who came later immediately said in a deep voice. This dog was a police dog specialized in drug detection, but in addition to drug detection, it was also very sensitive to another smell, which was the smell of blood. So when he saw the police dog's reaction, he immediately became vigilant. The policeman from before immediately stepped forward to explain. The 2 of them looked at Rinpoche while reporting to him through the walkie-talkie. Sir, please get out of the car and open the trunk for inspection. One of them reported through the walkie-talkie and nodded to the person beside him. Rinpoche turned to look at the policeman outside the window and sighed. Like I said, they'll be here soon. Do you want him to call your superior first? Rinpoche asked. Please get out of the car. One of the policemen extended his hand to his waist. Rinpoche was helpless. He really didn't want to cause any trouble. He opened the door, got out of the car, walked around and held his phone in one hand as he leaned against the car. The inspection won't take too long, right? I can't run here. I've already said that the things in the carriage are confidential, so I'll just wait here. I won't make things difficult for you, so don't look for trouble for yourselves, right? We'll know when the people arrive. After hearing what he said, the 2 policemen used the walkie-talkie to report again. This time they didn't say anything else. One of them watched Rinpoche from the side while the other continued to check with the police dog. What kind of case do you have? Rinpoche asked curiously. This is confidential, the policeman retorted. What skincare products do you use? You don't tan at all after running around every day. Can you recommend them? Rinpoche asked again. He felt that he had been tanning very quickly recently. The sun in Dayo was very strong, and he didn't have the resistance to the sun like the aboriginals. After living in the wilderness for a few days, even the Empress couldn't recognize him. The policeman was speechless when he heard this. How could Rinpoche find something to say? We're on a mission. Be serious. We're on the same side. Why are you so serious? It's not easy in any department. Rinpoche laughed mischievously. If Yang Sen heard this, he would have vomited blood. It was always others who had it hard. Since when was it his turn to have it hard? Rinpoche was also bored, mainly because he didn't have much to say to those barbarians in Dayo. They wouldn't understand anything he said, and it was no different from playing the lute to a donkey. It was rare that he had nothing to do now, so he bragged for a while and enjoyed the peaceful daily life on Earth. After he nagged for a long time, the policeman helplessly asked, "Are you really from the secret department?" He had never seen such a chatterbox in a secret department. Wasn't the secret department supposed to be tight-lipped first? He couldn't tell why this person was tight-lipped at all. Guaranteed to be fake. Do you know about the M78 galaxy? We are the Messier 87 department, which specializes in studying aliens. Rinpoche continued to boast. Not only do I know about M78, but I also know about Ultraman Tiga. The policeman couldn't help but say, "Comrade." After waiting for a long time, Rinpoche finally waited for the person arranged by Yang Sr. In fact, before that person came, Yang Sen had already called the police station, and the police station then called the team leader who was on a mission. Finally, the news reached the police officer, and the two of them chatted happily. Rinpoche was still a little reluctant to leave as he hadn't met someone who could talk so much with him in a long time. When he arrived at the building where the Messier 87 department was located, he immediately saw Yang Sen and his men waiting in the parking lot. What did Mr. Rin bring? Everyone looked expectant. 2 corpses of earth wheel experts, Rinpoche said. There were actually quite a lot of these corpses some time ago, and even spirit wheel experts had them. For example, Lu Chi's head was said to be smelly when hung on the city wall. However, Yang Sen and the others were immediately excited. To them, the value of these 2 corpses was no less than that of the 2 Ultraman from the M78 galaxy. One had to know that they had only seen a few words about Earthwheel experts from the secret manuals that Rinpoche had given them. Everyone knew that Earthwheel experts were very powerful and far exceeded the limits of humans, but they didn't know exactly how powerful they were. There were too many things that could be studied from these 2 corpses, and they represented the direction of human evolution in the future. Their value couldn't be measured with money. No one expected that Rinpoche, who had always brought small things over, would actually bring back such important things this time. However, when the bag in Rinpoche's trunk was opened, everyone felt that these 2 corpses were really miserable. None of them were intact and they were both chopped into 2 pieces. Some of them were even missing limbs and other parts. More importantly, the incisions were actually stuffed with rags. After pulling out the rags, the internal organs that were squeezed together and stained with mud and sand were revealed. Such precious things were actually treated like this by Rinpoche. Everyone felt stifled and distressed, as if their own sons had been abused. After that, everyone ignored Rinpoche and went to deliver the corpses, leaving only Rinpoche and Yang Sen behind. "Mr. Rin, what's the level of an earth wheel expert in that world?" Yang Sen couldn't help but ask. Although he didn't know what level an earth wheel expert could reach in that world, he knew from the secret manuals that Rinpoche had given him that the level of an earth wheel expert in that world wouldn't be very high. After all, he didn't believe that Rinpoche would so easily hand over such good martial arts manuals to them. Their biggest hope now wasn't to obtain better martial arts manuals through Rinpoche, but to find more suitable cultivation methods for humans through the research of these martial arts manuals. Although this wouldn't be a short-term task, with so many elites doing research and the supercomputers doing all kinds of calculations, it should be more efficient than in that world. Everyone was still very confident in the technology on Earth. Furthermore, the techniques that they had researched and modified were more suitable for humans on Earth. However, he still wanted to know what level an Earthwheel expert was in that world. After all, the strength of an Earthwheel expert that was simulated by the supercomputers had already far surpassed that of humans. Rinpoche's answer would also allow them to understand a little more about that world. "The level of an elite army," Rinpoche replied after thinking for a while. "About the same level as the special forces." Rinpoche deliberately concealed one point. In Deo they were indeed at the level of an elite army, and the big shots in the imperial court were all spirit wheel experts. However, in Great Xia an earth wheel expert was also considered a small expert. They're actually at the level of an elite army? Yang Sun was a little surprised. Although he felt that the level of an earth wheel expert wouldn't be too high, he didn't expect them to be at the level of an elite army. An army made up of earth wheel experts. This news was indeed very frightening for people on Earth who could only look up to earth wheel experts at present. More or less. Ren Baqin nodded. His words tend to be true. Behind a monitor, someone looked at Ren Baqin's expression and concluded. Chapter 388. Sending the corpse to the research institute and obtaining the results he wanted wasn't something that could be achieved in a short period of time. Even if the country mobilized a large amount of manpower and resources, it would be difficult to obtain valuable results within a few years. However, Ren Baqin could afford to wait. 10 years, 20 years. It was fine as long as he could get what he wanted. After sitting in Yang Sen's office for a while, he returned to his car and opened a file containing the information on the girl named Qi Jieyu that Shen Feng had given him previously. First, he took a look at the half-body photo in the file. She indeed looked very similar to the Empress. If her face was thinner and her eyebrows were thicker, she would look exactly like the Empress. The only thing that was lacking was her temperament. Qi Jieyu, female, 20 years old, well-off family. Her parents were small businessmen and she had a younger sister and brother. Her phone number, address and class timetable were all very detailed. In addition to these, the words changeable personality were written next to her personality. Ren Baqin looked through it carefully, put the file back into the file, and drove to SH University. She should have classes today and he would be able to take a closer look at her once. He parked his car outside the school, found a place to park and strolled in through the main gate. No one stopped him. He found the teaching building according to the map and went up to the 3rd floor. When he found the place, classes had just ended. Ren Baqin found a good spot, leaned against the wall, and watched as a large number of students walked out of the classroom. Soon he saw Qi Jieyu chatting and laughing with a girl as they walked out. Many boys around them stole glances at her. After all, her appearance was considered outstanding everywhere, and it was normal for her to attract attention. Ren Baqin squinted his eyes. He felt the urge to kill this girl again. Even his hands subconsciously reached for the handle of the gun at his waist. Kill her. One Empress is enough. There is only one Empress in both worlds, and there is no need for another person who looks like the Empress. Such a thought naturally popped up in his mind. Kill her. Kill her. Kill her. It was as if there was a voice in Ren Baqin's mind. Could it be that you want to leave someone who looks like your wife to marry another man in this world? Although they are not the same person, they look almost the same. She is the Qi Zixiao of this world. From this point of view, they are the same person, just the same person in a different world. Ren Baqin's heart was filled with a sudden murderous intent. Many thoughts emerged in his mind, and all of them were telling him to kill this girl immediately. Ren Baqin placed his hand on the handle of the gun at his waist. He wanted to pull it out a few times, but he restrained himself. His body trembled slightly. If it weren't for the reminders from the students around him, he might not have been able to restrain the killing intent in his heart. Many people also noticed this strange-looking man. He squinted his eyes and gave off an uncomfortable feeling. One of the men, who was walking with his head lowered, raised his head and saw Ren Baqin. At first he seemed to recall something, but soon after, his face revealed an extremely angry expression. It was this guy who had made him the laughingstock of the entire school. His name had spread throughout the entire school, and there were always girls who would whisper and point at him when they saw him. It almost made him vomit blood. His university life was almost half over. It's you, it's you. The pitiful boy who had been tricked by Ren Baqin previously rushed forward angrily and swung his fist at Ren Baqin's face. Ren Baqin tilted his head, twisted his body, waist and buttocks, and dodged the other party's attacks. After being trained by Tong Lan for so long, even though Ren Baqin was still a rookie in that world, ordinary people on Earth were no longer a threat to him. Everyone saw a boy rushing madly toward a man who was leaning against the wall and swinging his fist at him. Then they saw that the man was strolling leisurely and easily dodging the other party's attacks. He didn't even take his hands out of his pockets and didn't even look at the other person. So handsome. Many girls' eyes lit up. Ren Baqin's appearance was still acceptable. He was originally thin and delicate, but after living in the other world for so long, his figure had become much stronger and his face had become angular. Especially after more than a month of war experience, he looked like he had an imposing aura. Compared to the boy who was swinging his fist at the side, it was obvious who was superior. Not to mention he didn't make any big movements when dodging the other person's fists and kicks. He was able to easily dodge in a narrow area. Such skills and calmness still made many people interested. The soft exclamations from the side made the unlucky boy even angrier. He had become a clown in the eyes of others. If he had a knife with him, he would have stabbed Rinpochen a few times. Rinpochen was suddenly attacked and sobered up a lot. Jianghu had already gone down the stairs, and at this moment, the killing intent in his heart began to slowly fade. Rinpochen dodged for a long time and gently kicked the unlucky boy's ankle, causing him to immediately fall to the ground. "I won't accept you. Just give up on that thought. I already have someone I like," Rinpochen said in a pitiful tone. The boy on the ground almost spat out a mouthful of blood. It was like this again. It was like this again. What kind of hatred and resentment did he have? Because of this bastard he became gay. Then it was still this bastard who made him a pestering gay. At this moment he even had the heart to cry. Rinpochen conveniently tricked the unlucky boy again and strolled out of the school building, attracting the attention of many girls. Jianghu was nowhere to be found. Rinpochen also didn't want to look for her. Just now he had confirmed that there was indeed a problem. Something was interfering with him. He just didn't know what exactly it was. There should only be metal chains in his head. Was it the metal chains that were interfering with him? But why? And why was it fine when he saw other people but it was like this when he saw Jianghu? It was somewhat similar to the situation when he first saw the seventh prince. Could it be related to the Empress? Rinpochen couldn't figure it out. After returning to the car he rubbed his head. He was considering whether he should ask the Empress. After staying in a daze for a while, he returned to the villa and ordered a lot of batteries and solar panels online in preparation for picking up the Empress. After another 2 days he returned to Dayo with the batteries and solar panels. Someone? Rinpochen appeared at the place where he had left previously and shouted. Suddenly, a few figures appeared in front of him. "How surly?" Rinpochen first asked. "Now that 1 day and 1 night had passed, it should be about time, right? We're still looking for those who escaped. At that time the great Xia soldiers ran everywhere and many of them hid. Now they are scattered and searching," Jianghu immediately replied. "Bring the things and set off." Rinpochen asked someone to tie the things onto the fork-horned cow's back, and the group rushed to Liao City. 3 days later, Rinpochen once again returned to the small city where he had stayed for a month. The blood on the city wall had already dried up, telling the story of what had happened here. At least tens of thousands of people had died on this city wall. From afar the city wall had already turned purplish black. Rinpochen went straight to the city commander's residence. After alighting from the fork-horned cow, the city commander had already received the news and came out. Principal Ren. Chapter 389. In fact, he was a little worried that she would look for him after finding out that he wasn't around or that he would return to Lan City. However, apart from eating and sleeping, Rinpochen hadn't discovered any other survival skills. As long as she didn't starve to death, she would probably still be sleeping somewhere between Liao City and Lan City a year later. Fortunately, that didn't happen. Soon, he was led to a room in the city commander's residence by someone arranged by the city commander. "Sir, she probably doesn't know that you've left," the man who brought him there said with a grin. Rinpochen was shocked. It had been half a month since he left, right? She didn't even realize that he had left? These days she hasn't left the house at all. She's always sleeping. Every day all she needs to do is leave some food at the door. She probably doesn't even know that the great Xia soldiers outside the city have left. That burly aboriginal also had an embarrassed look on his face. Other than sleeping there was only eating. Every day it was just a rhythm of sleeping, sleeping, eating, sleeping, 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 sleeping. "Second brother, is that you?" Rinpochen opened the door with utmost respect. Rays of light shone into the room from behind him. Amidst the light and darkness, even the dust particles floating in the air could be seen. He wasn't mistaken. It was indeed dust. There was even a layer of dust on the ground. As Rinpochen pushed the door open, the dust fluttered in the air. Messy footprints could be clearly seen on the ground. They were left behind by Lin Xiaola when she went to the door to get food. A humanoid figure was lying on the bed. As he got closer he could hear it breathing lightly. He stood in front of the bed and saw Lin Xiaola sleeping soundly in a tube top and a short skirt. His saliva was dripping down his face. If not for the drool on her face and her sleeping posture, her figure was not bad. Her bra and short skirt revealed a large area of her snow-white skin. Unfortunately, that face full of saliva was really unforgettable to Rinpoche. In addition, Rinpoche felt that his chest muscles might be more developed than hers. This was a pity. It was so flat that it could be considered a scarce resource even among the Aboriginals. The Aboriginal ladies often practiced martial arts or did manual labor, but they had never seen such a flat surface before. Get up. The sun is shining on your butt. There are no more white rabbit creamy candies. Why is it gone? Lin Xiaola opened her eyes, which were filled with confusion. She first demonstrated to him what it meant to say, "Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing?" Only after a long time did he regain his senses. You're here. Why aren't you accompanying His Majesty? Rinpoche's face was full of vigor. Sure enough, you really don't know when to sleep. Great Xia has retreated. They retreated? Don't worry about it, just call me when you're leaving. Lin Xiaola yawned and her eyelids started to fight again. She didn't care at all about her beautiful figure being exposed in front of Rinpoche. Rinpoche continued to look embarrassed. I have already forgotten about you once. If I didn't think of you, would you still be sleeping here after 3 to 5 years? Or, after 100 or 80 years, he would bring his grandson to look at your bones, pointing at you and saying to his grandson, "Look, this person has slept his whole life from birth to death and is still sleeping now. We'll set off tomorrow. Go out and take a bath first. You're stinking." Rinpoche looked disgusted. Impossible. It's normal for our race not to take a bath even once in our lifetime. Lin Xiaola looked like he was lying to her. Damn. Rinpoche was shocked. You're not an Aboriginal? Who said I am? Lin Xiaola asked with her eyes closed. Call me when you're leaving tomorrow. Rinpoche's jaw dropped. He was really shocked. There was actually someone in the Empress's palace who wasn't an Aboriginal? No wonder when he first saw her, he felt that she was more gentle and less heroic than the Aboriginal women he usually saw. No wonder she was so flat. No wonder she could sleep so much. He had always thought that she was sick. Just like on Earth, there were people with narcolepsy who needed to sleep 20 hours a day. He never expected that she wasn't an Aboriginal. You're not from Great Xia, right? Rinpoche asked. He suspected that there were probably other races in this world besides the normal humans and Aboriginals like the Yun nation of Great Xia. Of course not. Lin Xiaola said with her eyes closed. Aren't you annoying? Let me sleep a little more. Rinpoche grinned. All right, let this unknown race continue to sleep. He would ask on the way. Although he said this, Rinpoche felt like a cat was scratching his heart after leaving Lin Xiaola's room. He was really curious about what race she was. After waiting at the city commander's residence for a day, he saw the travel-worn winged cavalry in the afternoon of the second day. They entered the city and went straight to the barracks in the corner of the city to rest. After 2 days of chasing and killing, they felt a little tired. Are they all settled? Rinpoche asked someone. It was an old acquaintance, Tingji. There might be some who escaped. Sir Li is arranging for people to capture them. Let's set off tomorrow? Rinpoche nodded. Okay. Rinpoche strolled around the city before returning to the city commander's residence. He turned on the radio and called, Your Majesty. What's the matter? The Empress's cold voice was heard. Have you been eating well? Are there any chefs in Tiesua Pass? Rinpoche asked. No. The Empress replied immediately. In the past, it was all those things and she didn't care whether they were delicious or not. However, after getting used to eating food with all kinds of spices, she immediately noticed the difference when she ate those things again. Fortunately, the Empress was used to being poor. Even though the food didn't taste good, she could still swallow it. Have the Great Xia soldiers at Tiesua Pass retreated? Rinpoche asked again. They were gone when I woke up this morning. After the Great Xia soldiers knew that those 2 armies weren't coming back, there was no point in staying here any longer. They took advantage of the night to break camp and leave so that the Aboriginals wouldn't rush out of the city and kill them. I will set off to fetch Your Majesty tomorrow. Inside Tiesua Pass, the Empress was sitting in her room with one hand supporting her chin and the other hand fiddling with her hair. The radio was on the table in front of her. After hearing Rinpoche's words, the Empress used her finger to draw a circle in the air and wrapped her hair around it. She sounded a little happy as she said, It's time to go back. following which she changed the topic and said, "Don't forget about the rainbow cloud that you promised me." She still remembered this matter. "What would you like to eat, Your Majesty? I will bring some food for you first." "Hot pot." The Empress immediately replied. She and Rinpoche were thinking of the same place and they were both craving hot pot. Erguotu, candy, chocolate, xiaolu, popcorn, tomato-flavored potato chips, tomato-flavored seaweed. The Empress continued to give Rinpoche a list. "Your Majesty, I have prepared a house for you that is filled with all kinds of snacks. You can take them when you open your eyes," Rinpoche said. "That's not bad." The Empress immediately beamed with joy after hearing this. "I haven't seen Your Majesty for half a month. It feels like several years," Rinpoche said softly. "Umph." The Empress wrinkled her nose and snorted softly. "I saw a small flower on the road. It's outstanding and is the king of flowers. I feel that it is the best match for Your Majesty. I have seen that flower before. It's everywhere in the garden." The Empress immediately recalled that Rinpoche took a small white flower that was everywhere in the garden and said that it was the king of flowers. It was very compatible with her and even wrapped it carefully with a piece of cloth. When she saw it, it had already withered. This isn't the same as the previous one. The previous one obviously had the disposition of a king. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared in the garden. However, this flower is more suitable for Your Majesty. I shall wait and see then." The Empress smiled. The two chatted for a while and showered the affection of Shi Qing and the others who were listening to the radio. After switching off the radio, Rinpoche went out to look for flowers in the city commander's residence. He picked one of each and wrapped it in a large cloth. After picking dozens of flowers, he sat on the ground and spread the cloth, revealing all kinds of flowers inside. Chapter 390. The next day Rinpoche finally got Lin Xiaola out of her room. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that she had a sour smell. Looking at her clothes, he couldn't help but ask, "Don't you need to bathe and wash your clothes?" Lin Xiaola yawned, went to the well and poured a bucket of water over her head. Then she spun on the ground like a spinning top. She was so fast that Rinpoche couldn't see her clearly. It was all a blur. Large droplets of water fell from her body and splashed on Rinpoche's head. The principle was similar to the drying bucket of a washing machine. A bucket of water was like a spinning top that could be shaken dry. Bathing and washing clothes were done in one go. It seemed very high-end. Rinpoche pondered for a long time and felt that she was like a dog shaking its fur after bathing. 2 minutes later, Lin Xiaola stopped and sat on the ground with a confused look on her face. "Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Wait for me. I'm feeling a little dizzy." Rinpoche looked embarrassed. Why didn't he realize that Lin Xiaola was so amusing? He went forward to touch her clothes and found that they were quite dry. Although they were still half wet, they would be completely dry in an hour in Dayo's weather. "Who did you learn this from?" Rinpoche asked curiously. She was a genius to be able to come up with such a strange skill. "Do I still need to learn? I knew it when I was born. Isn't it awesome?" Lin Xiaola looked up proudly. "It's actually instinct. Awesome." Rinpoche gave her a thumbs up. What was there to be proud of? Rinpoche felt that she was born in the year of the dog. She was a cat girl and a human girl, but she was most likely a dog girl. It sounded like she was scolding someone. "Yesterday you said that you weren't an aboriginal. What race are you?" Rinpoche finally had the opportunity to ask. "I don't know." Lin Xiaola replied. "You don't know?" Rinpoche's voice rose an octave. "No one told me." Lin Xiaola felt wronged. "Didn't librarian Lin tell you? How do you know that you aren't an aboriginal?" Rinpoche was puzzled. "I was picked up by Granny. She said that I wasn't an aboriginal, but she didn't know what race I was. It took me 40 years to grow to this size. I'm not even an adult yet." Lin Xiaola gestured at her chest and said with grievance. It seemed like she knew about the tablet too. "But she's actually 40 years old?" Rinpoche was surprised. He really couldn't tell. Furthermore, he was still underage? What race was she? How long is their lifespan? Even though he knew that there were Kirins and Jiao dragons in this world, this was the first time he had seen a creature with a human appearance. Rinpoche felt like sending her to Earth for research. Then what do you know? Anyway, some things will naturally come to light. Lin Xiaola couldn't explain it either. "Did you become a spirit wheel expert by sleeping every day? You can increase your strength by sleeping?" Ren Baqin finally asked this question that he was very concerned about. He had this suspicion for a very long time. Yeah. I'm still growing, and growing means sleeping. My strength naturally reached that level. Lin Xiaola felt wronged when she talked about this matter. However, Ren Baqin felt even more wronged. He had to work himself to death to cultivate, while others only needed to sleep. How unfair was this world? Sure enough, there was no such thing as equality. He was equivalent to a child in the countryside. Even if he worked hard all his life, he might not necessarily obtain as much as others when they were born. This was too heart-wrenching. However, have you ever fought with anyone while sleeping every day? Having strength but not knowing how to use it is like a child swinging a sledgehammer. When we go back, I will introduce you to someone who you can spar with every day. You don't have to be afraid of hurting her. She is sturdy and can take a beating. Ren Baqin rolled his eyes and found a sparring partner for Lin Xiaola. The flat-chested Lolita and the flat-chested Lolita were a perfect match. I don't have time. I'm sleepy. Lin Xiaola yawned. She was sleepy again after pouring a bucket of water on herself. Besides, I know how to fight. I can do it when I'm sleeping, Lin Xiaola added. Really? Ren Baqin's eyes widened. She shouldn't be like this even if she had a cheat. He had been trained by the little Lolita to the point where he couldn't even beat a 10-year-old Lolita. You can increase your strength while sleeping, but you can also increase your skills while sleeping? Sure who? Ren Baqin shouted. Sir, I'm here. Sure who hurriedly ran in after a response. Can you control your strength to the earth wheel level? Why don't you two have a spar? Ren Baqin was determined to see if Lin Xiaola was an invincible cheat. No, I'm sleepy. Lin Xiaola was about to fall asleep. 1 pack of White Rabbit creamy candies. 2 packs. Deal? Sir? Sure who was dumbfounded. What was going on? I will be gentler. Lin Xiaola jumped up from the ground. 2 packs of White Rabbit creamy candies had finally lifted her spirits. She will control her strength to the earth wheel level. You can test her skills. Ren Baqin took a few steps back and concentrated on seeing how Lin Xiaola was doing. Please. Sure who cupped his fists at Lin Xiaola. Lin Xiaola lowered her body and instantly stuck close to Sure who's body. She dodged his punches and kicks, twisted her body into a weird position, and scratched his face with her claws. Ren Baqin saw Lin Xiaola flash, and a few bloody claw marks appeared on Sure who's face. Fall. Is this the strength of an earth wheel expert? Ren Baqin stared. It should be. Lin Xiaola looked aggrieved. Is it? Ren Baqin asked Sure who since he couldn't see clearly. However, in his opinion, Sure who wasn't weak. Lin Xiaola was indeed using a cheat code. She increased her strength and techniques while she slept. She was definitely a pay-to-win player. Ren Baqin recalled the time when he played games in the past. He worked himself to the bone to kill monsters and was then crushed by the pay-to-win players. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.